Come and join me on Faro.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello and a very warm welcome to GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst, and Gloria De Piero live in Liverpool throughout the afternoon as Sir Keir Starmer delivers his keynote speech to the Labour Party conference. But it's not looking quite so positive for the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and her Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. Markets continuing to react badly to Friday's mini-budget. Although the pound has recovered a little against the dollar, now a former US Treasury Secretary is warning there could be worse to come, with parity even for the pound against the dollar and the euro. So, faced with this potential political open goal, Sir Keir Starmer addressing party members and delegates at 2 o'clock. He'll unveil his vision of Britain under his leadership. Could it be a new Labour? Well, we'll bring you the latest reaction and analysis throughout the programme. But first, the latest news headlines with Rosie.
A very good afternoon to you. It's just 1 minute past 12. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Chancellor's meeting city investors to discuss a possible deregulation package. Kwasi Kwarteng is talking with pension funds, insurers and asset managers ahead of revealing a new medium-term fiscal plan, which he hopes will bring down debt. It's after the pound appeared to have recovered some of its losses as markets reopened this morning, having hit a record-breaking low against the dollar yesterday. Hundreds of mortgage products have been withdrawn by lenders after the Bank of England said it wouldn't hesitate to raise interest rates. Well, economic commentator Laurie Laird told GB News she believes the pound may fall again.
I can tell you that the pound has stabilized a bit. We're at between 107 and 108. How long we stay here is anyone's guess. Neither statement from the Treasury, neither the one from the Treasury, one from the Bank of England were particularly convincing to me. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people have another pop at the pound. We've stabilized now, but I think we'll see another sell-off at some point sooner rather than later.
The Labour leader will use today's party conference speech to offer the country what he calls a fresh start. Sir Keir Starmer will commit, he says, to getting the UK out of a so-called endless cycle of crisis. He's also going to quote Tony Blair, who once described Labour as the political wing of the British people. Sir Keir will go into the speech encouraged by latest polling. A YouGov survey shows that Labour's opened up a 17-point lead over the Conservatives. Ofgem have issued a warning to most of the UK's gas and electricity suppliers that they need to provide more support to households who are struggling to pay their bills. The energy regulator says all providers, bar British Gas, need to fulfil their obligations in helping customers who have a difficulty in paying bills. Following a market review, it found process failures in companies giving help to those who need payment plans. New research suggests that millions of people in the UK have taken on an additional job to manage the cost of living. Insurer Royal London surveyed 4,000 adults and concluded that over 5 million of us have taken on a second role and another 10 million plan to do so. 4 in 5 people surveyed have already made changes to help pay for the rise in prices. Workers at the UK's largest container port are staging fresh strikes from today in a dispute over pay. Around 1,900 members of the Unite Union at Felixstowe have walked out following an 8-day stoppage last month. The strikes plan to continue until next Wednesday. These workers told us why they're on the picket line.
We estimated or calculated that the company has made close to £250 million over the last 2 years. And as workers who generate that profit, we believe we deserve a decent pay rise. And we believe the company can afford it. They're choosing not to.
They should be taken as serious, because it's a very serious matter at the end of the day. We need to get this resolved so we can all get back into work and carry on with our jobs.
Torture, extrajudicial killings, they've been carried out by Russian forces, says the United Nations. The report says Putin's invasion of Ukraine led to a wide range of human rights violations. They've also called for immediate steps to demilitarise the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Moscow didn't immediately comment on the report, but they have previously denied allegations of human rights abuses. The Kremlin says it cannot rule out sabotage as the cause of damage to its Nord Stream gas pipeline. 3 offshore lines running under the Baltic Sea developed unexplained leaks yesterday. An investigation's now been launched into the case. Officials say it's impossible to eliminate when the gas network will be restored. The head of Britain's biggest police force says he wants to hear from those who say they've been let down by the service. The Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says the organisation has been far too weak and the constructive anger from the public can bring positive change. Sir Mark, who took over as Scotland Yard boss earlier this month, says he's determined to get the culture right. The Royal Mail have unveiled 4 new stamps in memory of the Queen. Approved by King Charles III, the postage will go on sale from November. The second-class stamps in the collection mark the Queen's accession and coronation, while the first-class stamps show the monarch standing in her admiral's cloak. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens.
Rosie, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, is, as we speak, meeting business leader, pension fund leaders and insurers and so on, facing growing criticism, of course, after announcing that £45 billion in tax cuts, which sent the markets into turmoil. It plunged the value of the pound to record lows against the dollar yesterday morning. It has recovered a little since then. But now, former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers has gone so far as to call the Chancellor's economic policies utterly irresponsible. He suspects they might even drive the pound below parity with the dollar and the euro. Not great news, of course, for current or aspiring homeowners too, as the pound and indeed bond deals led Britain's biggest mortgage lenders to pull their fixed-rate deals because of the overall situation with interest rates. In response, the Bank of England says it will not hesitate to raise interest rates once more, but will it be enough to settle the markets? Let's get the views of our news and economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, who's up at the Labour Party conference for us. Liam, first of all, let's just reflect. There has been a bit of a different narrative in some of the papers, pointing out that currency traders, short sellers, were responsible for a bit of this situation with the pound.
Yeah, I take that with a pinch of salt, if I'm honest, Mark. It's a bit like sailors complaining about the sea. We live in a capitalist society and there are currency markets and they go up and down. I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that this isn't a serious situation, and indeed, more so than the pound, those borrowing costs, potential steep interest rate rises, that's what we should really be focusing on. But the notion that people lawfully trading the currency markets and shorting, as you say, it's when you bet on a currency going down, that's a completely legitimate activity, and I don't really see any merit in trying to point the finger at people who are trading currency. It's what people do.
More sort of grist to the mill, where a former US Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, then saying, well, he expects it may even have parity. The pound may have parity with the dollar and the euro.
Yeah, some of us have been predicting parity between the pound and the dollar for many, many months, unless the Bank of England started to raise interest rates a bit more decisively. Look, Larry Summers is a Clinton-era US Democrat. He's no friend of the Conservative Party, and I think there is quite a lot of politics in this narrative. Yes, you can point the finger at the so-called, the now comically named mini-budget, the most influential financial statement, certainly of the last 10 years. And you can say that the Tories over-egged the tax cuts, particularly that slashing of the top rate of income tax, the so-called additional rate, from 45 to 40%, without putting forward costings of how they were going to do that. You can certainly make that case, and it's a legitimate case. Most of the new borrowing, of course, is for this energy price cap, and no one in politics would argue against that. But I think a lot of the reason the markets have taken such umbrage is also because the Bank of England has been so slow to raise interest rates. Pretty much everyone across finance across the globe expected a 75 basis point rise in interest rates by the Bank of England on Thursday, and there only turned out to be a 50 basis point rise. The markets don't like that, because then they get caught, as the phrase goes, with their pants down. They're told by the Bank of England to expect something, and so they position themselves, and then they lose money when the Bank of England doesn't actually deliver. So it's partly about the Bank of England. It's partly also about a budget statement, a mini budget, that was rightly seen as ill-judged in some parts. But I must say, this morning, the pound has recovered back to where it was before we went into this kind of crisis mode. It's back now at 108 against the dollar. And also, crucially, those interest rates on financial markets, which will influence the Bank of England, they have also started to retreat. But be in no doubt, anyone who's got a fixed rate mortgage that's going to expire soon, they will face higher interest rates when they try and remortgage than otherwise would have been the case. So this is certainly a serious situation.
Yeah, and we've got the Chancellor meeting the great and the good from all the financial areas, asset managers, pension funds, insurers, Aviva, BlackRock, JP Morgan, big hitters. That meeting going on at the moment. It was supposed to be talking about deregulation, so-called Big Bang 2, but clearly the agenda will have changed, and all their eyes will be on November for, well, as we say, a maxi budget, another fiscal event, but clearly he's got to try and reassure everyone now.
Yeah, the name of the game for the Treasury and the Bank of England is to try and convey the notion that they're not rattled, that they don't think there's a panic on, trying to paint the currency markets as overreacting, as full of hyperbole, and many journalists too, they're trying to sort of undermine a lot of the commentators. This meeting between Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, and various leaders in the City of London, it was in the diary a long time ago. He won't have wanted to cancel it because that would have looked like a panic move. So he's forced to go to this meeting, and he wants to talk about making it easier for pension funds to invest in infrastructure, which was a lesser noticed part of that mini budget on Friday. But of course, you're right, Mark, he is going to get questioned about the currency and borrowing costs more generally. Of course he is. And a lot of those comments will no doubt leak to people like me and you, and we'll end up broadcasting them. I personally think yesterday the Treasury, when it said we're not going to do anything or say anything, you can wait until an autumn statement on the 23rd of November, that's a long way away. And the Bank of England too, trying to say we're not going to do anything, we're not going to do an emergency rate rise to protect the pound, we're just going to carry on and have our next meeting in early November. That's quite a courageous thing to do, to act as if they're so unrattled by what's happening, given that the whole world is talking about the value of the pound. I wonder, Mark, with the best will in the world, if the Treasury and the Bank of England can stick to that move on, nothing to see here narrative. We'll find out over the weeks to come.
Yeah, indeed. Sir Charlie Bean, of course, former Deputy Governor, saying perhaps they should have been an emergency meeting, but we shall see, as you say, in the weeks ahead. Liam, for the moment, thanks for that. Back to you and Gloria in Liverpool, of course, shortly. But just reflect, of course, of the political fallout and what's going on and what some Tory MPs are making, especially when a YouGov poll in this morning's Times newspaper has the Labour Party surging to its largest lead since 2001. Just to remind you, Labour at 45%, up 5, Tories 28%, down 4. Let's speak to our political reporter, Catherine Foster, who's been in Downing Street all morning. Anything to see?
Well, they're keeping very quiet.
Yeah, the door's shut and the window's closed, I guess.
The door was shut. I was speaking to somebody on the phone. They were saying, basically, nothing to see here.
Move on.
We're absolutely fine. People are supportive. They're behind the Prime Minister. I would expect this afternoon they will start to wheel out supportive ministers willing to speak, because we're not hearing much, are we, from the Conservatives during all of this, to send the message we're all OK. But I would say the mood generally is certainly anxious and unhappy for different reasons. Obviously, they're all concerned about what this means for the country, this instability. Yeah. They're all concerned for what it means for their electoral prospects, and will they be out of a job in a couple of weeks. But also, obviously, the true believers, Liz Truss, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Kwasi Kwarteng, they still believe this is the right approach, that the markets have reacted badly. There's some blame being apportioned, isn't there? The Daily Mail are saying, you know, it's the city's fault and whatever.
Yeah, as I was just discussing with Liam, the short selling, if you like, of the pound on the currency markets. But is there actually a dividing line, a divide between the Sunak camp, Rishi Sunak, and those people who were saying, Mel Stride, for instance, who's chairing the Treasury Select Committee, we told you so. We told you this was going to happen. Suggestions, of course, that others, like Tom Scholar, who was in the Treasury, who got sacked effectively, was also warning Kwasi Kwarteng against doing what he has done.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, this started in the House of Commons straight after Kwasi Kwarteng and made the announcement. Mel Stride was on his feet saying, why is there no OBR assessment? And now, as things have got worse and worse, we're hearing more and more voices. So this morning, Hugh Merriman, Conservative MP, he backed
senior Tory
Rishi Sunak. He was tweeting, he said, the victor is losing our voters with policies we warned against for the good of our country and the livelihoods of everyone in our country. I still hope to be proven wrong.
The timing is not great because we've got a Tory party conference next week after Labour. Labour likely to push the narrative today, we are a government in waiting. Are these voices, Hugh Merriman, Mel Stride, going to be heard at that Tory party conference?
Well, we should see. I mean, they're beginning to get their message out, aren't they? They're beginning to speak more loudly. Obviously, nothing from Rishi Sunak, but clearly this is exactly what Rishi Sunak was warning against back over the summer. There's a piece been doing the rounds in The Spectator from a month ago. This run on sterling, the cost of borrowing going up, all this instability. And a lot of people were like, oh, no, what a load of rubbish, what a load of rubbish. But now, I mean, obviously, we don't know how this is going to pan out. So there certainly is a division. And of course, don't forget that Liz Truss's base of support was never very broad.
Amongst the MPs, that's right.
The MPs.
Yeah. Good point.
She won, but not by that many, by the membership. But amongst the MPs, she was not their first choice. And there were many people that always thought this was not going to go well.
And is that why we've not heard or seen from her? I know the Chancellor's been, obviously in the number 11 basement, sort of waiting for everything to fly over the top, but we've not seen or heard anything from her either, have we?
No, we haven't. Isn't it interesting that she's been very quiet, and it'll be, what is she up to? When is she going to be? Because the thing is, I think there is a feeling, even among supporters of these policies and these tax cuts, that there have been unforced errors. Like, for example, they didn't have to reduce the top rate of tax, or they didn't have to do that now. They didn't have to remove the cap on bankers' bonuses now, because politically that was always going to be...
They could have done that in November at the big budget.
A very tough sell. Yeah. And then seeing the reaction that there was on Friday, Kwasi Kwarteng then doubled down and said, this is only the beginning. There's going to be much more to come. They didn't have to do that now. So this sort of shock and awe approach, I think sort of shock and horror.
Well, spooked the markets, yeah. And you bowled a question at Jacob Rees-Mogg in number 10 as he was lolloping along to the door of number 10.
He was asked if it was still the right approach. He said yes. Then he was asked whether the city don't like it, why are you rewarding them? Because, of course,
with the bonuses,
City are being rewarded doubly, also with the top rates of tax cut. And he looked like he was thinking about answering and then decided against.
Kept his counsel, as they say.
And he usually does have an answer, a quick answer for most things.
Fascinating times. Thank you for updating us on that. So that's the situation in Downing Street for number 10 and number 11 this morning. What about the Labour Party? Let's head to Liverpool. Gloria is waiting there for us. Could be a defining day, of course, in history. Sir Keir Starmer setting out his stall, perhaps as a future Prime Minister, Gloria.
Absolutely, it is going to be a big day today at Labour conference, as we will be hearing from Keir Starmer at 2 o'clock as he sets out his vision for the country. I'm joined now by Susie Stride, a former Labour candidate. She'd like to be a candidate again, and Sally Jamieson, the Labour candidate for Doncaster Central. Well, you two, you're a candidate in Doncaster Central. It's a seat Labour already holds. You are seeking to be a candidate, but you've been one in a seat where you didn't win before. So you two want to be in Parliament, so you'll be particularly keen to hear what Keir Starmer has to say today. What do you want him to say? How can he help you in your election?
Well, I'm a serving prison officer currently, Gloria, so for me, one of the big things I want to see is about what we're going to do for public services to make them fit for the future. You know, public services like mine have been decimated over the last 12 years of Tory government, so I'm really looking out for that today. But I think also the big thing on everyone's mind at the minute is the energy bills and the energy crisis. So I'd like to hear more about that in his speech. We've already heard some really good policies around that. And so I think what today's about is about tying together a really good week of policies and discussion and a really good feel at this conference for Keir to put forward his vision to the British people and show that we're ready for government.
Susie, same question to you. What do you want to hear from your leader? You want to be in Parliament, you need a leader that's going to connect with the country in order to make that happen.
Yeah, well, I work with vulnerable young people in East London. I want to see Keir talking about how we can create a country where it doesn't matter whether you're born in Eton or you're born in Poplar, you can thrive, you can flourish. You know, equally you are important. So for me it's that, but it's also people need affordable housing, people need to be able to get a doctor's appointment and not wait a week. People need to see that we care about the climate. But also I just think people need hope and they need to know that things can change, things can get better. It's been tough going through COVID. It's been a tough few years. People need hope and the Tories are never going to give it to them. Because why? Because they're progressive and they don't have the ideas.
But Susie and Sally, you've both outlined a sort of list of what you would like to hear. Actually, the mood from this conference, from the leadership, seems to be responsible, don't make too many promises, you're in the centre ground. Is it radical enough to inspire?
Yes. Remember, the centre ground is where Labour was at in '97 and we won. And I'm sorry, but poor people stay poor if you don't win. And yeah, we'd all like to maybe go a little bit more radical, but if that's not where the country's at, we're not here to serve Susie Stride's ideas, we're here to win the country so we can bring change. And ultimately, we only win when we're in the centre ground. But anyone who says the centre ground isn't radical can go home, as far as I'm concerned, because in East London, under the last Labour government, every failing school was lifted. There were children's centres. You could get a doctor's appointment within 48 hours. That's not radical for people where maybe it didn't touch their lives. Maybe they were so privileged it didn't touch their lives. But in East London, where I was, that Labour government was radical, and I believe Keir will be radical. The centre ground politics are radical because they win.
Is he a bit boring? Is the centre ground a bit boring? Is all this talk of responsibility a bit dull, or is it going to inspire your voters and get you into Parliament, Sally?
No, I think it will inspire voters, Gloria, because do you know what? What I hear in my workplace in the prison and amongst voters across Doncaster is that mini budget got announced last outrage when this winter people aren't going to be able to afford to pay their energy bills. And I think after the absolutely ridiculous premiership of Boris Johnson with his lies and his failings and the joke which has been this Conservative government, particularly over the last few years, people are actually ready for someone that can be honest, deliver what they say they're going to deliver, and actually put forward a plan that is not just dealing with the short-term crisis we're facing, but setting Britain up for a long-term, stable future.
You're both sticking the boot into the Tories. You would expect that. You want to be Labour MPs. But I want to ask you this. I've knocked on loads of doors over my time. I know that it won't be a slam dunk. Yeah, we're all coming back to Labour. It's all wonderful. Just be honest about the hurdles that you face. If there are doubts when you knock on those doors, people who may have switched their vote last time, loads of working class people did, what are the doubts that Labour needs to address too?
I think that in the past it's been that people haven't always known what we were going to do. So we've outlined the Tory failings but not necessarily set out what we stand for. But I do think, Gloria, that in the last few weeks that has changed. And I think there's been a real change in mood from voters across the country. Particularly, and I go back to that budget on Friday, I think it's really hit home and people are actually looking now for an alternative and they're ready to listen and they are listening. And I think it started with the energy policy over the summer, which really did reside with a lot of people.
What are your negatives that you still need to tackle, Susie?
Well, look, people unfortunately bought into the lie that the economic crisis was our fault. So we still need to win people back on the economy and let them know they can trust us with the economy. And you can't trust the Tories because what have we seen? The pound nosedive. Anyway, but number two, I think there's a lot of people out there that just think we are all the same, and it doesn't matter who they vote for. Yeah. We're all the same, we all sound the same, we all look the same, it doesn't make a difference. And really, we do need a more diverse Labour Party. We do need more working class MPs. We do need more people that have done a normal job, have lived experience. We don't need to read a briefing to say this is what needs to change. We know what needs to change because we've lived it ourselves. We understand struggle and pain and what it looks like to have a low wage, so you have to do long hours and not see your kids. People need that connection of you get me. Let's be honest, that's why they like Boris. They felt that he got them. And so as we show them we get you, genuinely I believe people will come back to us.
Okay.
So yeah, that's...
Right, we've got about 30, 45 seconds each maybe. You are both young women. You want to be in Parliament. You are going to get tons of abuse if you make it to Parliament. It's toxic. Are you up for that?
I am, Gloria, yeah, because actually what I've learned through my job and just through the last few years in particular is actually the real change lies in Parliament and it lies in government. And actually the only way we're going to get the changes we want to see, whether that's building a high skill, a high wage future, whether that's reforming public services, improving the prison system, is by getting a Labour government.
The toxic nature of politics, women get it worse.
They do, but you know what? You live once. And bring all the change you can possibly bring. And so for me, I've worked as a youth worker, I've helped my kids on a one-on-one level, but we've got to change the system. And for me, they're never going to get to sit here or on the green benches, and I owe it to them to make sure that I fight to get there so that generational inequality is stopped and we can all live in a more prosperous, thriving nation.
Well, there's a lot of passion from you two. Let's see if your leader delivers the same amount this afternoon. Great to talk to you both, Susie Tride and Sally Jameson. After the break, GB News understands that there are no plans for an investiture ceremony for the new Prince of Wales. We'll be joined by our royal correspondent Cameron Walker, and we'll be bringing you much more Labour conference coverage as we wait for Keir Starmer to make his address. But now it is time for your weather.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
we're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB Newsday. Just to update you, we are expecting to see the Prince and Princess of Wales in Wales today, heading to Anglesey first, where, of course, Prince William was a helicopter pilot, and then down to Swansea in the south, their first visit as the Prince and Princess. But it's understood that there are no plans for an investiture ceremony for the new Prince of Wales. Earlier this month, you remember, First Minister Mark Drakeford appeared to strongly suggest that a copy of a repeat of the grand ceremony that saw Charles made Prince of Wales in 1969 in Carnarvon would be inappropriate. Let's talk to our royal correspondent Cameron Walker joining us in the studio. That was quite a spectacular at the time. Lord Snowdon sort of doing the stage management of it. Clearly, times have changed, but now we understand no ceremony at all, is that right?
Yes, that's what I've been told. It's understood there are no plans for any kind of investiture for the new Prince of Wales. We remember those images from 1969. It almost looks like a mini coronation, doesn't it? Of
the golf ball, which I think Charles wasn't too keen on actually putting on his head, I seem to remember.
Yes, exactly. And in a cost of living crisis, perhaps it was seen by those at Kensington Palace and Prince William himself that it would be a bit inappropriate, perhaps, for a big grand investiture at such a difficult time for so many families across the country.
Does it also acknowledge perhaps the change since 1969? There we are. That's the golf ball crown that I was talking about that Snowdon had actually designed. I think there was actually a golf ball inside that globe to actually get it as a perfect round. But clearly there was, even despite the welcome in Wales when he went to Cardiff, I think there was an online petition saying that there should not be a new Prince of Wales, which I think is about 35,000 signatures now. Indications that, there is still a sort of indication, not of Welsh independence, but they want to have their own stand.
The biggest challenge for Prince William and Princess Catherine is to earn the trust and respect of the people of Wales. They have long held Wales and the country in their hearts. Prince William's first engagement ever, when he was 8 years old, was in Wales when Princess Diana and the then Prince Charles took him to Wales. His first newlywed married home was in Anglesey. Prince George, his oldest son, spent the first few years of his life living in Wales. So it's a long-held tradition of this country.
And he was a helicopter pilot there for 3 years for RAF.
Yes.
So, a really important job. And from all accounts, a very happy time for them there in the north of Wales.
Yes, it certainly was. I think it was their time to almost be a normal family, as it were, and they chose, Prince William and Princess Catherine chose to take George and Charlotte back to Wales during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations in June. And I think this shows that this isn't a last-minute plan to get Prince William and Princess Catherine to Wales for their first engagement. They have a genuine passion and love for the people of Wales and want to shine a light on the opportunities, but also the challenges for people there.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, their first visit is to Anglesey. I think they're going to see the lifeboat station there, which I'm just reading has 70 awards for gallantry.
Yes.
Given, of course, the state of the seas there into the Menai Straits, into the Irish Sea. And then to St Thomas's Church in Swansea in the south, where they'll be visiting a food bank.
They will be, but just following the lifeboat station, they're also going to be taking a short walk along the marina to a cafe bar where they're going to be meeting local people, local businesses in Anglesey. And a walkabout, exactly. And then we are expecting, as you say, for them to travel to Swansea, to St Thomas's Church, which is one of these redeveloped church which seems to be the jack of all trades in terms of the building's function. So it's got a food bank which supports over 200
So a social hub then, in other words?
A social hub, yeah. It's got a Swansea Baby Basics distribution centre for young people. We know that, sorry, I was about to say Duchess of Cambridge, the new Princess of Wales has a big passion on early childhood development. So no doubt this is a reason as to why this was put into the schedule today.
Great. Cameron, thank you for that. Of course, as soon as we get the pictures, we'll get you back in and see how they're getting on there on their first visit as Prince and Princess. But time now for an update on the news headlines. Here's Rosie.
Good afternoon. It's 12:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The Chancellor's meeting city investors to discuss a possible deregulation package. Kwasi Kwarteng's talking with pension funds, insurers and asset managers ahead of revealing a new medium-term fiscal plan, which he hopes will bring down debt. It's after the pound appeared to have recovered some of its losses as markets reopened this morning, having hit a record-breaking low against the dollar yesterday. Hundreds of mortgage products have been withdrawn by lenders after the Bank of England said it wouldn't hesitate to raise interest rates. The Labour leader is going to use today's party conference speech to offer the country what he calls is a fresh start. Sir Keir Starmer says he'll commit to getting the UK out of an endless cycle of crisis. He's also going to quote Sir Tony Blair, who once described Labour as the political wing of the British people. Sir Keir will go into the speech this afternoon encouraged by the latest YouGov polling, which shows Labour 17 points ahead. Workers at the UK's largest container port are staging fresh strikes from today in a dispute over pay. Around 1,900 members of the Unite union at Felixstowe have walked out following an 8-day stoppage last month. The strikes plan to continue until next Wednesday. Ofgem has issued a warning to most of the UK's gas and electricity suppliers that they need to provide more support to households who are struggling to pay their bills. Following a market review of the energy regulator says all providers, bar British Gas, need to fulfil their obligations in helping customers who have difficulty paying. Royal Mail have unveiled 4 new stamps in memory of the Queen. They've been approved by the King and the postage will go on sale from November. They feature images of the late monarch throughout the years. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB Newsday. Just to remind you, back up to Liverpool for the Labour Party conference with Sir Keir Starmer making that keynote speech today and, of course, addressing the country's economic woes. But let's bring in our reporter, Ellie Costello, now, who's been looking at how businesses affected by the pound dropping to new lows and, of course, the likelihood of interest rates climbing further and faster. Ellie, it seems there's no end to these challenges being thrown at businesses.
Yes, good afternoon to you, Mark. And we're outside Tapas Revolution in Westfields in Stratford today. We are talking about that falling pound and how it's going to be affecting the restaurant business and the restaurant trade. Now, Tapas Revolution is a Spanish-themed restaurant. There's a group of them. There's 10 restaurants in the UK. And as the name suggests, it's an authentically Spanish restaurant, so they import much of their food. But that is the issue, as most food at wholesale is sold in dollars. So they are currently going to be spending a lot more on getting the food into their restaurants. Well, earlier I spoke to the executive chef and the founder of Tapas Revolution. His name is Omar Alaboy, about what the falling pound means for his business.
Well, it's incredibly concerning because it's a matter of time that we start feeling it. We've saw it on the news. Now, very, very soon, it will start happening in the restaurants, in the supermarkets. We import most of our produce in this country. We are a heavily populated, small country, and farming is at a premium. Wages are expensive, therefore that's why they farm in other countries. It makes complete sense. And here I have a few examples of produce that it's imported that we serve in our restaurants. Table olives and olive oil. Spain is the largest producer of olive oil in the world, and that is about to go up by 20% in a month's time. So for all of those of you at home, make sure you stock up some good extra virgin olive oil in the month ahead. Spanish Serrano ham. And I thought I'll bring something as simple as a breadstick, which is a great example of a produce that may seem like the cheapest thing in the supermarket, and the reality is that it has two of the produce that has increased most in price in recent months after the Ukrainian war, which is wheat and oil, as well as water. Water is free, luckily, still. Some good news in there. But that's the reality of what we are facing at the minute. As much as we like to use local produce seasonally, the reality is to have a differentiated offer, you must have ingredients that come from all around the world.
Who is the executive chef of Tapas Revolution and also the founder. Well, earlier I was speaking to Ronan Givon, who is the chief executive of Recce. Now, that is an ordering app that restaurants use to get in touch with their suppliers. And he was predicting yesterday that that restaurants might have to offer much more limited menus in the upcoming months because ingredients will become so expensive. And he also predicted that many restaurants such as these that rely heavily on imported produce, such as Tapas Revolution, which we heard earlier, they import about 60% of the produce on their menus. He was saying that many restaurants will have to look at sourcing their produce more locally, looking at British produce, which is going to be expensive, but also a different way of working for these restaurants. And of course, it's not just the falling pound that is now going to affect the hospitality sector. There is, of course, a cost of living crisis and the energy bills that these restaurants are now facing. Even though there is a cap, it's still double on what it was last year. And when I was speaking to Omar this morning, he was saying it's not just the food that's gone up, it's everything from the cost of napkins and the cost of printing menus. So it really is a very challenging time for the hospitality sector. And the challenge will now be to look at the cost base, to look at the suppliers and see if they can get creative and try and mediate and mitigate some of that financial impact on its customers.
Yeah, and of course the other problem is if they want to go and get a loan to try and buy themselves some time, that's going to be more expensive now because of what's happened with interest rates climbing further and faster.
Well, it's exactly that as well, Mark. I mean, you've got to remember as well, many restaurants are already on their knees and emerged on their knees from the coronavirus pandemic. Many of them only got through that with the help of loans and with help from Rishi Sunak and the various things that were put in place to support them through that time. And it looked as though they were coming out of that. Now they've been hit by a cost of living crisis and a falling pound, which is making their supply chains and their produce so much more expensive. And where you could previously rely on the banks or the loans to get you through a difficult few months, with these interest rates, it now looks like even getting one of those loans or even the repayments on them would be far too difficult for many businesses to reach. So it is going to be a very challenging few months for the hospitality sector. And don't forget as well, Mark, that the cost of living crisis means that going out to eat is a very expensive hobby, fun thing to do for people and for families. And it's going to be very, very tough for people to come to a restaurant and spend money for 4 or 5 people. So even getting people through the door is going to be a huge challenge for the hospitality sector through the cost of living crisis.
Indeed. Ellie, thank you very much for that. We'll let you get back to the olives and Serrano ham. It looked quite a tasty spread there. Thanks very much for updating us, and good luck to that restaurant, of course. Well, on that cost of living crisis, earlier we heard from Labour MP Peter Kyle at the party conference in Liverpool. He said how Labour would tax fairly and stop companies from financially benefiting from Putin's war with a windfall tax. Here's a clip of what he had to say.
Unlike the Conservative Party, the Labour Party will not borrow for revenue. We will borrow to invest. Now, what Rachel outlined yesterday was our investment pledge, which would invest to recapitalise the British economy, which would reduce inflation, and it would get our economy going in terms of being prepared for net carbon zero. But the principle is this, that yes, we've been very upfront that we would borrow, but we would also generate revenue. Now, for us, we think that if you have companies who are not making enormous advances in profits based on guile, strategic thinking and cunning decisions made by the people running those businesses, but simply because they are making enormous profits based on the back of Vladimir Putin invading another country, we think it's fair when everybody in society is going to go through a really challenging economic situation, that those companies who are making more money on the back of that situation should just contribute a bit more in that period. And when even the chief executives of those companies accept the principle of that, it is extraordinarily ideological to say that actually we won't take that money. That money will be lost to the British taxpayers, and that debt will be loaded on future generations via the energy companies, not even by central government, but by the energy companies. The reason we have an energy price cap in the first place is because those companies have been treating their consumers unfairly in the previous period. They've admitted this. I was on the select committee that looked into all of this. The market was broken. So we know these energy companies need to have strong regulation. There needs to be strong interaction from government. But when you get that relationship right, the market works better for consumers. And that's the approach that we've been taking.
The views of Peter Kyle at Liverpool. What about your views, though? Of course, as ever, you've had plenty to say to us in response to Labour's criticism of Tory policies. Martin's got in touch to say, have all the Labour politicians forgotten what we've gone through the last few years? If it wasn't for sound Conservative policies, there would have been no money to give out. While Jeff says we do not trust Labour with the country's finances based on repeated failures when historically in power. We also do not trust them on relations with the EU, illegal immigrants, controlling the woke agenda, or effective policing. These are areas where the Conservatives have failed also, but Labour would be worse! Exclamation mark. We need a new party that has some national pride. On government policy, Graham goes on to say, it would be nice to see the government stick to the policies it believes are right, rather than chopping and changing every day, driven by the latest media scare stories. Keep the views coming. GB Views at gbnews.uk. And, of course, as we said, we'll be back to Liverpool and get the latest with Gloria as Keir Starmer sets out his stall for the future of the Labour Party, perhaps a new government too. To other news now, though. Around 1,900 workers at the port of Felixstowe, the UK's busiest shipping container port, beginning another 8-day strike today. Workers were given a 7% pay rise, which the trade union Unite claims is an effective pay cut because of the high rate of inflation. Well, joining us now, our national reporter Thea Chicombo from the picket line there in Felixstowe. And Thea, they've had a stoppage once already about a month ago. It didn't seem to stop too much of the container trade going on. What's going to be going on from there for the next 8 days?
Well, for the next 8 days, people will be coming here every morning. They started this morning on the first of 8 days, which they're going to be striking over their pay deal. They've been offered 7%, but they say it's not enough. They want around 10%. The Unite Union fighting against that. Earlier this afternoon, well, this morning even, I spoke to a representative of the Port of Felixstowe saying they're doing enough and they've given them a package which they think is reasonable during this time.
Well, this strike is about pay. We've offered and we are implementing a pay deal of 7% plus £500. That dates from the 1st of January when CPI inflation was 5.4%, and there'll be another pay award due on the 1st of January, so in a little over 3 months' time.
The cost of living is going up. We've had all these government announcements in the last week or so. I suppose some people are feeling the pinch. Do you kind of understand that point of view from their point of view?
Well, it's because the cost of living is going up that we made an interim payment of £500 in April of this year, and it's why we're implementing this deal now. The collective bargaining process with the union has been exhausted. We've been unable to reach an agreement with them, and it's not fair to not pay our workers a pay increase. So we're giving them 7% plus £500 now, and then there'll be another pay award in 3 months' time.
Well, as you heard there, the Port of Felixstowe representatives saying they've exhausted all measures trying to get a deal good enough for the workers. They will be continuing to be here on the picket line every morning for the next 8 days. Today is the first of that day, and we'll be covering that and giving you the latest reaction.
Yeah, and just give us an indication about the frustration that those workers are feeling. Clearly, they're looking at the inflation rate and now all the bad news about the economy, indicating that perhaps they feel they have got nowhere else to go.
You're absolutely right. I spoke to some of them this morning and they're saying, well, the cost of living is going up around 9.9%, nearly 10%. We are doing the best we can, but we have to look after our families, to pay bills as well. So it's not just coming to work and fulfilling that, but also we have to look after ourselves. So they are trying to do their best, but they're saying they want this as a message for those in management to hear that change needs to happen very soon.
Theo, thanks very much for updating us there at Felixstowe. And of course, we'll see what happens in the, as you say, the coming days, 8 days of strike action there. But let's return now to Liverpool. In the next hour, leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, will address his delegates and party supporters in, well, a keynote speech with all the problems, of course, of the economy. Tom is there for us. Tom, there is a growing expectation there, given the latest poll, of course, in the Times, that they may be, at some stage, preparing for power, or are they keeping their powder dry?
Well, it does seem that the feeling on the floor of this conference is just that many delegates here are for the first time describing the Labour Party as a government in waiting. That's the first time that we've been hearing those words at a Labour Party conference for a long time. Last year at the Labour Party's conference in Brighton, there was much constitutional wrangling, battles between the left and the right over rule changes, over selection, over various policy fights too. This year, much calmer. This year it seems like the sort of Starmerites, if we want to coin such a word, have got full control of the Labour Party, that there is less wrangling between those who oppose him and those who support him, although perhaps that's simply because some of those who have been opposing him are not here this year, either chucked out of the party through disciplinary tribunals or simply not elected by their constituency Labour parties to come along as a delegate to this year's conference. Interestingly, I'm going to probably be a little bit overheard there, though. Here we go. We've got a little bit of very loud overhead words there from people saying that the leader's speech will be very, very busy and that people need to arrive early. In fact, just in front of the GBNews stall here, people are already snaking up around the conference hall, lining up to hear that speech that has been trailed as something that will be echoing Tony Blair. And this is a party that will be trying to go for an election in perhaps 2 years' time and win on a Tony Blair scale way. That would be the most remarkable turnaround in the polls, of course, because the Labour Party lost the last election with their worst defeat since 1935. And while there has been some polling good news for the Labour Party, 17 points ahead in the latest YouGov poll that's reported this morning, there is still some question marks over how well the Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer is doing. A Savanta Comres poll released in the last half an hour or so has shown that Starmer, whilst ahead of Liz Truss on the best Prime Minister question, is not as far ahead as perhaps might be expected. 37 to 35%. That's the Labour Party leader's lead in the latest best Prime Minister question.
Yeah. And how much detail are we expecting in the speech on policy, Tom? Because Rachel Reeves outlined this idea of a national wealth fund yesterday, but didn't give us too much. I mean, are we going to get particularly the costings on this? Because that's where they've been criticising the Tories, of course.
Yes, it's unlikely we're going to get that real detail this week at all. The typical strategy here seems to be that if you're ahead in the polls, you don't want to give people reason to scrutinise too much. You don't want to try and create too much news. You want to create a feeling rather than a complete prospectus. Perhaps if the Labour Party were further behind in the polls, they'd be wanting to do more radical things, but ultimately it's a similar strategy to what we saw at the Conservative Party conference last year. It feels like a very long time ago, but the Conservatives then had a commanding lead in the polls, and virtually nothing of significance was announced at that party conference. Similarly, at this Labour Party conference, we're hearing little bits of detail. We're hearing the odd policy here. They'll reverse one of these tax cuts, for example, and say they'll use that money to fund some more nurses. Quite how that works, how that would be new money, because they're simply reversing a tax cut that has not yet happened, is less clear. But the more they announce policy, the more they open themselves up to that sort of scrutiny. So I would be very surprised if we see full, costed, detailed policy announcements from Sir Keir Starmer. We'll see one or two new ideas, no doubt, and a big, broad brush theme, but not the sort of detail we'd expect in a manifesto.
But clearly a move to the centre ground, and some people calling it new Labour. I mean, what about those ghosts of 1997? Have we got Gordon Brown, Tony Blair and Lord Mandelson sort of stalking the corridors in the atrium?
Well, Lord Mandelson has been about in the Labour Party conference, but Tony Blair and Gordon Brown have not. At least perhaps their ghosts have been. And indeed, the words of Tony Blair will be echoed around the hall a little bit later. Sir Keir Starmer himself will be quoting the Labour leader, the former Labour leader, the last Labour leader to actually win an election, Tony Blair, in a phrase that he used back when he became leader of the Labour Party. He was taking on the left of the party. He was trying to reform the party. We had what was called the Clause 4 moment, where the Labour Party ditched commitments to nationalisation in the preamble to its constitution. But similarly, Tony Blair moved away from that strong trade union link by saying instead of the Labour Party being the political arm of the trade union movement, he said the Labour Party is the political arm or the political voice of the people of Britain. And that's the phrase that Sir Keir Starmer will be using a little bit later today, echoing the words of Tony Blair and pushing forward this idea that the Labour Party has fundamentally changed. He'll be trying to replicate the success that Tony Blair saw, having won those 3 general election victories. In fact, the history of the Labour Party has been really quite stark. Between 1979 and 1997, not a single win. In fact, 4 consecutive losses. Then 3 wins under Blair, and after that, 4 more consecutive losses.
Indeed. Tom, for the moment, thank you. Back to you and Gloria, of course, in Liverpool, as we get that speech from Sir Keir Starmer. For the moment, thanks very much indeed. Plenty more reaction to come to that, of course, as well, but let's get an update now on the weather for you.
Hello, I'm Aidan McKibben from the Met Office. Some sunshine out there today, but a number of showers, and it will be damp in the far southwest with some persistent rain for parts of Cornwall and West Devon, with this weather front which just slides in from the west. It really only affects the far southwest, perhaps thickens up the cloud for Northern Ireland as well. And another feature will bring some heavy showers to the north of Scotland. These showers could be combined with rumbles of thunder, and there'll be blustery winds as well coming from the north. Those northerly winds will also push showers into the north of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, northwest England and North Wales. And we've got that persistent rain in the far southwest appearing later. But otherwise, some sunshine. However, it will feel cool with that breeze coming from the north, 12 to 14 Celsius in the north, 16 in the south with a bit of sunshine. And the rain continues for Cornwall, West Devon through the evening, before eventually peeling away later in the night. Showers also continue into the north and the east coast, as well as for parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. In between, some clear spells and a cool night to come, with temperatures fairly widely 6 to 8 Celsius and in sheltered spots down to the low single figures. So perhaps a touch of grass frost first thing Wednesday, but otherwise a bright start for many. We've still got some showers coming into the north of Scotland as well as parts of Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, but the persistent rain in the far southwest will have disappeared. And it's a bright day otherwise, away from those showers, with less of a wind. Temperatures reaching 15 or 16 in the south, 12 to 14 again further north. Now, later Wednesday, an area of more persistent rain pushes into parts of southeast Scotland, northeast England, and that spreads south across northern England into the Midlands through the evening. Otherwise, clear spells, and then Thursday's another day of sunny spells and showers. Friday sees some more persistent rain and strong winds.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales
And Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
A very good afternoon to you. It's just 1 minute past 1. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, the Chancellor's meeting city investors to discuss a possible deregulation package. Kwasi Kwarteng's talking with pension funds, insurers and asset managers ahead of revealing a new medium-term fiscal plan, which he hopes will bring down debt. It's after the pound appeared to have recovered some of its losses as markets reopened this morning, having hit a record-breaking low against the dollar yesterday. Hundreds of mortgage products have been withdrawn by lenders after the Bank of England said it wouldn't hesitate to raise interest rates. Well, economic commentator Laurie Laird told GB News she believes the pound may fall again.
I can tell you that the pound has stabilised a bit. We're at between 107 and 108. How long we stay here is anyone's guess. Neither statement from the Treasury, neither the one from the Treasury, one from the Bank of England were particularly convincing to me. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people have another pop at the pound. We've stabilised now, but I think we'll see another sell-off at some point sooner rather than later.
The Labour leader is going to use today's party conference speech to offer the country what he calls a fresh start. So Keir Starmer says he'll commit to getting the UK out of what he calls a so-called endless cycle of crisis. He's also going to quote predecessor Sir Tony Blair, who once described Labour as the political wing of the British people. Now, don't go anywhere, because we'll be bringing you Sir Keir's speech here live on GB News when it starts in about an hour's time. Ofgem has issued a warning to most of the UK's gas and electricity suppliers that they need to provide more support to households struggling to pay their bills. The energy regulator says all providers, bar British Gas, need to fulfil their obligations in helping customers who've got a difficulty paying their bills. Following a market review, it found process failures in companies giving help to those who need payment plans. The UK's counter-terrorism police is warning the threat from terrorism remains very real, with officers intercepting 32 attacks over the past 5 years. The Deputy Assistant Commissioner told the International Security Expo in London threats are mainly from self-initiated terrorists who are difficult to detect. He said we all need to remain vigilant. Authorities are currently running 800 counter-terror investigations, whilst the official terror threat level is substantial, meaning an attack is likely. New research suggests that millions of people in the UK have taken on an additional job to manage the rising cost of living. It's the insurer Royal London who surveyed 4,000 adults and concluded that over 5 million of us have taken on a second role and another 10 million plan to. 4 in 5 people surveyed have already made changes to help pay for the rise in prices. Workers at the UK's largest container port have begun fresh strikes today in a dispute over pay. It's around 1,900 members of the Unite union at Felixstowe who've walked out following an 8-day stoppage last month. The strikes plan to continue until next Wednesday. Well, these workers told us why they're on the picket line.
We estimated or calculated that the company has made close to £250 million over the last 2 years. And as workers who generate that profit, we believe we deserve a decent pay rise. And we believe the company can afford it. They're choosing not to.
They should be taken as serious because it's a very serious matter at the end of the day. We need to get this resolved so we can all get back into work and carry on with our jobs.
Torture and extrajudicial killings have been carried out by Russian forces, according to the United Nations. Their report says Putin's invasion of Ukraine led to a wide range of human rights violations. They've also called for immediate steps to demilitarise the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Moscow didn't immediately comment on the report, but they have previously denied allegations of human rights abuses. The Kremlin says it can't rule out sabotage as the cause of damage to its Nord Stream gas pipeline. 3 offshore lines running under the Baltic Sea developed unexplained leaks yesterday. An investigation's now been launched. Officials say it's impossible to estimate when the gas network will be restored. The head of Britain's biggest police force says he wants to hear from those who say they've been let down by the service. It's the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, who says the organisation's been far too weak and that constructive anger from the public can bring positive change. Sir Mark, who took over as Scotland Yard boss earlier this month, says he's determined to get the culture right. King Charles's new cipher's been released as the period now of royal mourning ends. It features the King's first initial, C, intertwined then with the letter R for Rex, which is Latin for king. His Majesty's monogram will appear on government buildings, state documents and some post boxes. New banknotes featuring the King's likeness are also expected to enter circulation by mid-2024. You're up to date now on GB News, and I'll bring you more as it happens.
Hour of GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst, and of course Gloria, who's at the Labour Party conference for us in Liverpool. Just 1 hour now to Sir Keir Starmer's much-anticipated keynote speech. Promises perhaps of a country with a fresh start under Labour's leadership. And some positive news too as he prepares for that speech. Labour 17 points ahead of the Tories, according to the latest poll in this morning's Times newspaper. All ahead of that address to the conference a little later. Another rocky day too for the UK economy after the pound fell to its record low against the dollar yesterday. Mortgage lenders now pulling many deals amid rumours of more interest rate hikes as the bond yields climb ever higher on the international money markets. In response to that turmoil, the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng holding a crisis meeting with bankers and financial experts, we're being told. We'll have the latest reaction and analysis throughout the programme. So indeed, let's cross to Liverpool, where Gloria is waiting for us at the conference. Just an hour to go before that speech. As we said, 17 points ahead of the Tories. He couldn't wish for a better start to the conference day.
Well, let's test that with Jonathan Ashworth, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Mark. What kind of Keir Starmer are we going to see today? Is Labour the person that wants to be our next Prime Minister? Are we going to hear some policies from him?
I think you're going to see Keir Starmer give a very confident speech outlining how Labour has a plan to grow our economy sustainably, a plan to stabilise the cost of living, and a plan to rebuild our public services like the National Health Service, which really are on their knees after 12 years of Conservative government. So you'll see policies, but you'll also see a vision for the future of this country of good jobs, rising living standards and good public services.
I'm hearing a lot this week from the leadership, from all of you really, about your party now being responsible with the public finances. But isn't it the case that both parties' spending pledges are based on borrowing? If they are reckless, if your suggestion is that the government is reckless because they are borrowing too much, then you are equally reckless.
Well, let's just remember what's happened in the last few days. The Liz Truss has borrowed huge amounts in order to fund massive big tax cuts for the very super wealthy, for bankers and billionaires.
Ordinary people.
Big tax cuts who the wealthier get the bigger proportion of the benefit from those tax cuts. We've seen the reaction to that in the markets. You've had the Chancellor being chased up the street, and I've never seen anything like that. And the Chancellor, of course, on Sunday, Kwasi Kwarteng, saying he might cut tax further. It's an extraordinary behaviour from a Chancellor in a crisis, actually. Our approach is completely different. Every policy pledge that we make will explain how we're going to fund it, how we're going to cost it, and actually, for example, yesterday I was talking about how we're going to get more people back to work. We're going to reform employment services, because we know, 600,000 over 50s have left the labour market. If we can get more people into work with proper help, support and flexible jobs, that's good because it gets people off benefits, but it also grows our economy and we're all better off as a result of it.
There are suggestions that the government, in its push for growth, they might loosen the immigration rules in some sectors. We've got a shortage of HGV drivers, the care sector is struggling. Would that be something that Labour would welcome if you want to reform the labour market and get people back into work? Isn't it the case that actually there are more vacancies than people who are applying for jobs? So do we need to recruit some people from abroad?
Well, our migration policy will be based on a points-based system, and we'll always take into account what skilled labour we need. But fundamentally, you've got 600,000 over 50s who have left the labour market. Sickness rates are now rising at the highest level ever. Those were out of work for reason of sickness, the highest rates ever, 20-year high. And the government, well, some of it is COVID, some of it is mental health, some of it is people who are probably waiting for an operation on the NHS and can't get one. And yet the government is doing nothing to support this group of people find jobs, flexible work for them, should they want it. So I'm going to completely reform our job centres. I'm going to completely reform the way in which we offer employment support in this country to encourage people to go back to work.
I don't even like. It feels a little bit New Labour here. And I say that because I wonder if the challenges for the Labour Party are very different from the challenges in 1997, in the sense that in 1997, you were seeking the votes of middle-class voters. The challenge at the next election is to win back the working-class voters who deserted the Labour Party in droves. But the messaging is the same as 1997. Does it work for the challenges of the voters that you need to win back today?
I don't accept the division of the country in that way, because I think people in Ashfield, obviously you know Ashfield a gazillion times better than I do, but I think people in Ashfield want good jobs, they want a good, decent NHS, they want good houses, and they want opportunities for their children. I think that's the same in Stevenage, Peterborough and Milton Keynes as well. And I think what we're offering to the country at this conference is a way to grow our economy sustainably and to stabilise the cost of living crisis, because we want to raise living standards sustainably and a plan to rebuild our public services. And I think that's a message, not for one part of the country, I think that's a message for the whole country.
You are assuming that the government's plan for growth is not going to work now. Everybody can see that it has been a difficult weekend. But tax cuts could stimulate growth. And come the next general election, things might be very, very different economically. You need to avoid being complacent.
I think you're right to highlight our scepticism about the government's plan, because they've had how many? 3 or 4, 5, 6
They've
different plans for growth?
never tried anything this radical. This is radical.
They've had different plans for growth for 12 years. and they've not given us the growth that we need in our economy for 12 long, hard years. So, you'll have to forgive our scepticism. But here's the thing, yeah? If they are putting more money into the economy, which they claim they are, if you take that at face value, they're doing nothing to increase labour supply. And you will not grow our economy sustainably unless you've got more people moving into work and filling vacancies, which is why we've got a plan to, yes, create jobs, the green jobs of the future in technologies and industries, but also a plan to help people go back to work as well. The government don't have any plan on that front whatsoever.
I'm sure they would contest that, but we're talking to you today. Final question, your economic policy, the foundation's no borrowing for day-to-day spending. You are Shadow Pensions, Work and Pensions Secretary. Benefits will not go up under Labour on that basis, will they?
Well, I mean, you always make a judgment around benefits year by year based on what your inflation rates are. But of course, we have a commitment, for example, to the pension. Yeah, that the pension should always rise. Yeah, and that is our commitment. Of course, the government, broke their commitment on the triple lock for pensioners. Many GB News viewers have seen around a £500 real-term cut to the value of their pension because they broke their promise. We'll never break our promises to pensioners.
We'll look forward, I'm sure you're looking forward to hearing your leader and who you hope will be the next Prime Minister in just about 45 minutes' time. But for now, back to London, where Mark Longhurst is in the studio. Jonathan Ashworth, thank you.
Back to you as we see and hear more about what Sir Keir Starmer might be saying in that keynote speech. But the economy, of course, very much in the minds of all politicians. And it's a huge week for the UK economy. The pound, of course, rising, falling against the dollar since yesterday morning. Analysts blaming market instability on the new Chancellor's fiscal statement last week, or the so-called mini-budget, which has a maxi impact, £45 billion in tax cuts and a huge wave of new borrowing. So, has it actually been a plan for growth, or has it perhaps kicked us into the long grass? Let's hear from economist and former banker John Butler. Mr. Butler, thank you very much for joining us. I'm just looking at what the former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers is saying. Utterly irresponsible, and possibly even meaning that the pound will have parity with the dollar and the euro.
Well, he has a point. Certainly, this is a pro-growth budget. The question is, as we just heard, in fact, is it a sustainable pro-growth budget? Because, as you rightly point out, it's unfunded tax cuts we're talking about here, and they will be funded through borrowing. That borrowing will cost money. Those resources will therefore not be available for private sector investment. And there are some who believe that will lead, sadly, to a hangover. You'll get some growth in the short term, but it's going to have to be paid for somehow in the longer term. And the financial markets reacted in a way which tells you that was their first impulse.
Yeah, and indications going back to 1972 with Anthony Barber as Chancellor when he went for boom, and then, of course, we had the bust. But is there also another narrative, and that is that the markets perhaps have had a bit of a sort of frothy reaction, a lot of the currency traders, for instance, shorting the pound?
Well, look, there's a great amount of speculation in financial markets, and indeed, this is how the game is played. But if you take a look at the trend that sterling has been in for a long time, it's not a particularly positive one. So to be fair, you could argue that this budget is not in of itself a reason for sterling to be materially weaker than it already is. But there is this course of UK economic policy that this arguably extrapolates, which is relying excessively on government borrowing. Now, some would say a lot of that was due to COVID, that was a one-off, but it was a one-off when the UK's debt burden was already at a historic high, which has become higher still. The debt to national income ratio is over 100%. That's going to come home to haunt whoever's chancellor at some point in the future.
What does this current chancellor do next? He is, of course, as we understand at the moment, meeting insurers and pension funds, asset managers at a meeting that was supposed to talk about deregulation, so-called Big Bang 2. But clearly what he does or indicates he'll be doing in November at another fiscal event, we used to call them budgets, of course, that could determine how the markets go in the next month or so.
Indeed, this is very important. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that this is an unfunded tax cut. However, if indeed there is going to be meaningful supply-side reform to make regulations easier, clearer, more transparent, less costly with which to comply, and if there are going to be some sensible targeted spending cuts that go along with this, then it begins to look like a more sustainable pro-growth move. And that would be something that I would think the financial markets would reward. But it remains to be seen, and I'm skeptical when it comes to economic policy generally, that sometimes there's an element of politics in there and an element of electioneering. And when you're facing a general election not too far away, naturally you try to give the electorate the good news first, and you save the bad news, that is the possible future spending cuts, until after the election. There may be an element of that going on.
Because clearly, if there are spending cuts, part of that could be squashing public sector pay. And given, of course, what we've seen going on with the industrial sector at the moment, that could lead to some more strikes and industrial action.
Well, look, when inflation is running at the levels it is today, strikes and industrial action are almost inevitable. And I'm not taking sides in this, just observing. It's very, very difficult as a worker to be looking at the squeeze in the face when inflation is pushing double digits as it is today, and indeed as it was in the early 70s. But again, that's the danger. Going for growth when inflation is already as high as it is today, it's kind of like pouring gasoline on the fire a little bit. Sure, you'll get more fire, but can you really control it? And will it lead to unforeseen consequences down the road? I'm concerned that if not balanced with some sensible deregulation, sensible spending cuts, this package will eventually lead to more trouble than any good quality growth it delivers.
Can he afford to engage the reverse gear in any of this?
Well, look, pushing back is a political art, one that presumably is possible. I do believe there are elements within the Conservative Party who are a little bit concerned about how this was done and how it came about. And they're also probably concerned whether or not the Bank of England is on board with this, or whether they're just going to accelerate their interest rate rises. Now, that would really cause potential problems.
John Butler, former banker, economist, thank you very much indeed for bringing us your assessment. We'll see what occurs, of course, in the weeks and months ahead. For the moment, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So we are awaiting a keynote speech, as they've described it, but maybe a key moment in Labour's history as well. Let's head back to Liverpool. Gloria's waiting for us.
Hi, Mark. Keir Starmer is due to deliver that keynote speech at the Labour Party conference in about 40 minutes' time. He'll be here in Liverpool speaking to members, but actually he wants to be speaking to the country. He is predicted to echo Tony Blair's words in saying that Labour is the political wing of the British people. And Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting is staying positive, saying that cavalry is coming in the form of Labour, as YouGov polling gives Labour a 17-point lead over the Tories. Joining me now is Ben Nunn, who's the former head of communications for Keir Starmer. Ben, welcome to the show. You worked for Keir Starmer for 6 years, up until last year, so there's a bit of independence between you and the Labour Party now. But you will know him really well. How will he be preparing for this afternoon's speech? Does he get nervous? Does he have particular methods in preparation? Tell us.
I actually saw him this morning, so I can give an inside view. Of course he's nervous. I mean, would be nervous, ahead of these things. But I think he's also feeling really confident. I think he's really confident that we've had a really, really good conference this week, and the Labour Party hasn't had a good conference in a number of years. So I think of course he'll be nervous, but I think he'll be really confident that he's got a very compelling argument now for why Labour should win the next election. But also, for the first time in 12, 13 years, there's a real sense here, and you would have seen it and heard it from others, that Labour is on course to win the next general election. That's a huge, huge step change from where we were in 2019.
Isn't the danger of what you just said, that complacency can set in? That 17-point lead today, I put it to you that that is a result of people being fed up at the moment with the current government. That can completely change. The economy can pick up. The economic plan might work. The election is a long time away.
Yeah.
Complacency is an enemy.
Complacency is an enemy, and it is the worst thing we can allow ourselves to fall into. And to be honest, I think Labour Party's fallen into complacency in the past. But actually, I know the least complacent person in here right now is Keir. He is so aware of the scale of the challenge facing the Labour Party, but also what he needs to do to earn and win back people's trust.
We can just see him actually leaving his hotel. It'll be just a few steps. Is he walking into the conference hall now? Yeah, he's walking into the conference hall now. Now, we can see all these people clapping, Ben. It will have been part of your job to arrange these sort of shots that we're seeing now of Labour Party members looking incredibly enthusiastic to welcome him.
Yeah.
How big an operation is it to arrange shots like that?
It's a huge operation. It's a huge operation, and it is a big operation. But it's really important. It's about showing pictures. It's about showing a positive image for the party. But yes, it is a tough operation. It's not one I miss.
And we saw him walking in there with his wife.
Yeah.
Some political spouses. I certainly remember Sarah Brown, Gordon Brown's wife. She introduced him at one conference. Do you think we'll ever get some words from Victoria, or am I asking you to betray confidence?
I mean, I'm not anticipating her introducing him today, but I've known Vic for as long as I've known Keir, and she's an incredibly supportive partner to him and someone he really, really values as a
because it's a tough gig actually, and
very tough gig. It's very difficult. Yeah, it's really hard.
And it's unfair to ask you to to be her spokesperson.
Yeah. I wasn't.
Whatever party, whatever
Yeah.
any leader's spouse gets. It's tough for them not only to be supportive, but they often get scrutiny themselves. Now, there are suggestions like Keir Starmer. He's not really an orator. He's a bit boring. Is he going to find it in himself when he gets to the stage? The hall will welcome him and applaud him, but can he inspire? Can he move the country emotionally?
Yes, I think he can, and I also think he's been underestimated throughout his time in politics. He hasn't been in politics for very long, but he's always been underestimated. And I think we remember his conference speech last year, where he did.
It was long. It was very long. I think the season's changed.
I was there, and he did capture the moment, and he did capture the moment. I think he will speak to the country. What he is also is serious. He is really serious as a politician, because I think he thinks it's an incredibly serious job. And I never accepted this argument that people want, the public want someone with charisma, or someone a joker, or someone with a bit of a comedian to be the Prime Minister.
Boris did well. He had a connection. Boris Johnson did get a connection with people.
He did, but it's not gone very well subsequently. And actually, I think the difference the public have seen between the character of Boris Johnson and the character of Keir Starmer is quite stark. And I think when we are facing one of the worst economic crises in a generation, millions of people are worried about their mortgages, the cost of living. They are looking for someone who's just serious and going to get a grip and sort it out. And I think that's part of what I think you'll see from Keir later today.
And what about the clarity of the argument? You can't fight on too many different levels. As a communications professional, what's the central argument that Labour and Keir Starmer should be making?
Change. It's got to be an argument for change. By the time of the next general election, the Conservatives would have been in power for 14 years, and we would have had 4 Prime Ministers, 7 Chancellors, over a decade of slow economic growth, and that real sense within the country at the moment that Britain just isn't working. So it's got to be an argument of change, that the country needs change in order to get the economy growing and to get Britain working again.
Ben Nunn, thank you for joining us today. I hope it goes as well for you as you hope it does. Thank you, Ben Nunn. Let's head back to London, where Mark Longhurst is in the studio.
Gloria, thanks for that. Back to Liverpool, of course, as we get Sir Keir Starmer's speech. But let's move across now to Ireland, watching the UK's economy floundering. Perhaps Ireland's government set to unveil now a €6.7 billion budget package to help ease their cost of living crisis. But how will their support package have an impact on Ireland's trade with the UK, of course, and the whole issue of that Irish Accord. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie joining us now from Dublin. And Dougie, I'm just looking at the figures. 4.1 billion euros now, 6.9 billion euros 2023, so 11 billion in total. But they're saying actually that the tax figures mean that they won't necessarily have to borrow the money to do this.
Well, I have looked at those facts and figures as well, and it's very, very hard to project into the future, particularly in the current world markets. I mean, we have the prices of grain hiking because of Ukraine, and we look at the flood damage in Pakistan, what that will do to food prices. And we're also looking at a lot of the stuff here in and around green policies. But behind us, of course, this is the last budget for this particular Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, because he'll hand the reins over to Leo Varadkar because it is a coalition minority government. So that may cause a few problems and stirs in amongst the next year, 12 months. I don't think that it's really noted by a whole lot of economists here that it's a wise thing to be borrowing at this or projecting that far into the future with that much money. They are one of the few European countries that have a surplus return this year, but it is a very, very fine line, and they are trying to keep those people in work by giving a lot of healthy tax cuts to small businesses, corner shops. You can imagine running freezers and stuff with food, the prices, and they're trying to keep that all down and keep it on the wraps. And they may do it, but when we look at this budget as it cuts now, there are things coming in it like child under 16 hospital fees and stuff being waived. We don't have that problem in Great Britain because we have a national health. So there's lots of social issues coming into play here. There was 12 euros on a pension and 12 euros on everyday benefits. So it's not that much to the everyday Joe and Josephine in the street, but it does equate to an awful lot in a budget that's a very, very small economy when you look at it in the European scale. It also causes problems then for the euro and the pound dropping to near parity, that we will then have another problem because of the protocol. We have about 20% onto our costs already, 2.5% on tariffs of steel coming into Northern Ireland, and all of a sudden the protocol is acting very, very badly for Northern Ireland at that stage because it's having to compete in this market. And of course, if your money goes down, well, it means that you will buy more local goods, of course. But Britain doesn't manufacture that much. Ireland has done in the last 2 years. It has started to manufacture a lot of its own goods. It's one of the few European countries to do it, and I think there's a lesson to be learned there.
Yeah, the Celtic tiger economy, as they call it. I'm just looking at the sort of political messages coming out as well in the statement saying that they had to help with the cost of living pressures, but also not making them worse by adding fuel to the inflationary fire. A rather different story to what we're hearing here in London.
Yes, well, they have done something here so as they're not getting hit by the, coming through the eye of the storm and then the back end of the storm whipping them. So what they have done is, as I alluded to there, was they put more pressure on the public sector. They're making the public sector work harder instead of giving out more benefits and then putting that inflationary pressure on, which will drive up the cost of wages and drive everything else up and hit them on the way through. What they're trying to do is soften that blow by putting more onto the public sector, and they're looking at things like child tax credits for child care, but they're also looking at trying to get free school books in. They don't have that here, of course we do in Britain, and they're trying to soften everything that will take out of your family budget, the family purse, and decide, well, if we can soften that by getting the public sector to do that, we don't have to put up wages there, and we don't have to pay more benefits because we're actually saving on it. I suppose it's a bit like looking at your house and saying, well, do I really need Sky TV? Do I really need the second car? Do I really need 3 TVs in the house? And that's pretty much what they're doing here. It isn't a bad fiscal policy, but you've got to remember that the Republic of Ireland is part of the EU. It runs in the euro, and therefore it has no policy on interest rates, and that could hurt it very badly.
Yeah, get rid of the Sky News, but keep the GB News and the 3 TVs. Yeah. Dougie in Dublin, thanks very much indeed for that. Coming up, back to Liverpool, the latest from the Labour Party conference as Sir Keir Starmer prepares for that speech. But first, let's get an update on the news headlines with Rosie.
Thanks, Mark. It's 1:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Now, the Chancellor's meeting city investors to discuss a possible deregulation package. Kwasi Kwarteng's talking with pension funds, insurers and asset managers ahead of revealing a new medium-term fiscal plan, which he hopes will bring down debt. It's after the pound appeared to have recovered some of its losses as markets reopened this morning, having hit a record-breaking low against the dollar yesterday. Hundreds of mortgage products have been withdrawn by lenders after the Bank of England said it wouldn't hesitate to raise interest rates. The Labour leader will use today's party conference speech to offer the country what he calls is a fresh start. Sir Keir Starmer says he'll commit to getting the UK out of a so-called endless cycle of crisis. He's also going to quote his predecessor, Sir Tony Blair, who once described Labour as the political wing of the British people. Sir Keir will go into the speech encouraged by the latest YouGov polling, which shows Labour 17 points ahead. We're expecting that speech to start in about half an hour's time, and we'll bring it to you here. Workers now at the UK's largest container port are staging fresh strikes from today in a dispute over pay. Around 1,900 members of the Unite union at Felixstowe have walked out following an 8-day stoppage last month. The strike is planned to continue until next Wednesday. Ofgem has issued a warning to most of the UK's gas and electricity suppliers that they need to provide more support to households who are struggling to pay their bills. Following a market review, the energy regulator says all providers, except British Gas, need to fulfil their obligations in helping customers who have difficulty paying. Royal Mail have unveiled 4 new stamps in memory of the Queen. Approved now by the King, the postage will go on sale from November. They feature images of the late monarch throughout her reign. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.080 and 1.120 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,518 and 92 pence per ounce.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. Keir Starmer is due to speak in about 20 minutes' time. He's expected to describe Labour as the political wing of the British people, as he accuses the Tories of losing control of the economy. Some people are calling this New Labour relaunch as they speak for the centre ground. I'm joined now by top journalists, Andrew Pearce, consultant editor at the Daily Mail, and also Kevin Maguire, associate editor at the Daily Mirror. It is our wonderful duo. We're delighted to have you. How are you? Either of you hungover? Because there's a lot of alcohol being consumed at this conference.
I think he probably is more than me, because I was in bed just after 11, but I think you were out till gone midnight.
Yeah, but if you'd started drinking at noon, I mean, making it to 11 p.m. would have been pretty good.
My capacity is less than Kevin's, because I'm not as thick set, shall we say, physically. I'm more slightly built.
Oh, dear.
Andrew, when you saw that 17-point lead for Labour this morning, did that give you a hangover, even though you didn't drink too much last night?
Do you know what I thought? It's inevitable. It's midterm, but it's a big lead, and it's the best Labour have had. I think. Well, YouGov say it's the biggest lead they've ever had for Labour ever. So it's a real problem for the Tories now.
We've all been wondering when and if Keir Starmer would get the type of leads that Tony Blair enjoyed before 1997. He's finally got one.
But isn't it to do with the Tories' misfortune rather than anything to do with the Labour performance?
Yeah, any change in politics is kind of a governing party losing its way and an opposition beginning to look credible as an alternative. So governments lose elections as much as oppositions win them. And they haven't just shot themselves, the Tories, in one foot, it's both feet. I mean, that budget, that special financial operation, as successful as Putin's military one in Ukraine, absolutely murderous for the Tories, because people see it as just fundamentally unfair when you're stuffing the pockets of bankers and millionaires and people who are incredibly rich at the cost of other people. You know it yourself. You can't defend it. It's just bonkers. It's crazy.
I'll defend it in this way. I have to say I was surprised that they decided to cut the top rate of tax, because I thought probably not the best timing, it's not the best optic. But what she's doing with her Chancellor, Liz Truss, she's getting all the unpopular stuff out of the way immediately, because she's only got 18 months to 2 years. The Tories have never liked this top rate of tax. And let's not forget, Gordon Brown was Chancellor for 10 years. He didn't bring it in. He brought in that top rate of tax in the dying days of the Labour government, because he wanted to saddle the Tories with a problem when they were in government.
I know.
If it was such an important tax, why did Labour not do it?
I know your lot
over 10 years
wanted to bring back imperial measures, but I never thought you meant the pound lower than decimalisation in 1971.
The pound is stabilised. The pound is stabilised. There are benefits, of course, to a lower pound if you're exporting, but if you want to get a mortgage, it's not going to be good, because this is going to be inflationary.
You sound like the guy nailed to the cross at the end of Life of Brian, who's always looking on the bright side of life. You know, a weak pound is a sign. A weak pound, a weak currency is a sign of a weak economy.
It's not a good look for the Tory government.
But Kevin, in 18 months' time, in a year's time, maybe in 6 months' time, the economy will be back on track. It is arguable the tax cuts may stimulate growth. It might work. And is the worry for the left that they're not engaging in that possibility?
I think there's a lot of mites there. You can't.
I'm not sure the Labour Party are engaging for that scenario.
You can't rule it out, but just say there is some more growth, and the Tories have to remember they've been in 12 years when wages have been squeezed like never before. But just say there is a bit of growth, and just say it's even 2.5%. People will still not forget the fundamental unfairness of giving huge bungs to wealthy people while they are struggling. Labour's got to come up with an alternative. There's no question. If that's where you're going.
And they haven't.
Starmer today is all about reassurance. We're different to Corbyn. We've moved on. We'll be okay. We're the reasonable, competent party. But he has to give reasons to vote Labour.
He's boring and dull. We know that. Now, maybe people think we want a bit of boring and dull after the dramas of the last few days. But there's another poll today, Gloria, Comres, which shows only a third of voters think Labour have come up with a single interesting idea. All they've got is another windfall tax. That's it. It's no good. Oh, and some boring thing Rachel Reeves announced in that boring speech yesterday about green something or other. And I've already forgotten what it was. You've already forgotten that. It was so boring.
You've forgotten the energy price freeze, haven't you? Which your lot then nicked.
The Tories have done that, but they've done it for 2 years, and your lot have only thought about 6 months.
Andrew, because you have such insight into lots of things, but especially the Tories. I just want to, even though we're at a Labour conference, we're reading reports of like letters going in, Tory MPs sending letters in. I am assuming, but please correct me, that the world hasn't gone bananas and these reports it's been exaggerated. She's not in any real trouble.
No, she's not in any real trouble. And let me tell you, the moment a Tory leader is elected, letters start going in from people who didn't support her to the chairman of the 1922 because the campaign starts immediately to try and get rid of them. There'll be the usual suspects might have put in the letters. The Tory party simply cannot topple another leader and not before a general election and not have to have a general election. The leadership contest was really self-indulgent. 2 months went on far too long. So she's not in any trouble. The Tories have now got Liz Truss right up until the general election. And what if this bold gamble works? Then Labour are in trouble.
What you really mean, what happens if this fairy tale, fantasy, Narnia, holiday from reality, as Michael Gove said? Because know she only had the backing originally of a third of Tory MPs. So many were warning and blue-on-blue attacks that if she went ahead and implemented all those ideological promises she came up with to win a contest of 0.2% of the population, she would trash the economy. And look what she's done. She's trashed the economy. She's trashed the reputation of the Conservative Party had. I always thought undeserved. The Tory economic competence, sound money, controlling debt. You've blown all of those.
It's 2 days. The pound sterling has already stabilised. If it continues to stabilise, we're going to get another statement from the Bank of England next month, this could be the most successful political gamble in modern history. Could be.
Sterling has stabilised the way a patient has stabilised on a trolley after they've been brought in from a car crash in a hospital.
Look, every currency in the world is in trouble against the dollar because it's all powerful. I think Liam Halligan came up with a fascinating fact, didn't he, on this very show, when he said the only currency that's done better against the dollar is the ruble.
Yeah, and the sterling's in trouble against the euro too.
Let me go back to what's going to be happening here in about 15, 20 minutes' time. We're going to get Keir Starmer outlining why he should be Prime Minister. Now, Andrew touched on it earlier. He's boring.
He is.
I mean,
he's not boring.
He is.
Look, we had a clown as Prime Minister.
He had a 90-minute speech last year. Most people all fell asleep.
Look how that ended. He's not boring, but no, he's not going to go on in a clown outfit and start juggling balls.
Maybe he should.
Liven it up. He's going to leave that to you. But he's kind of dependable and competent, and he likes order.
Is he inspiring?
No, I don't think he is. No, I don't think he is inspiring.
What can you do about that?
But in the chaos, if you can have somebody who comes forward and you think they've got integrity and you will trust them and they will be on your side, then I think you will give them a hearing. That's what he's got to fill a blank piece of paper. He's got to have an emotional argument why he should vote Labour, but he also needs 5 or 6 real bite-sized policies that will improve people's lives.
Could he please not speak as long as he did last year, 90 minutes?
I mean, I think I may have grown a beard during last year's conference.
Exactly.
It was
and it was a philosophical statement. Do you remember a single thing he said?
No, I remember.
No.
You know, all I remember.
No.
I'll admit, all I remember from the speech is he got heckled.
Yeah.
And that was his best bit.
Well, he organised that.
He did, because he
organised the hecklers. Of course he did. Of course he did. He wanted hecklers so he could have his line to put them down. Of course he organised it.
Why on earth were the Labour Party yesterday debating electoral reform? I mean, do you not think it's a bad advert to the country to be talking about our electoral system when they're all, panicking about putting the heating on?
Yeah, but if you've been talking for 11 hours about the economy, health, education, the environment, you can find a little bit of time to discuss something that is actually fundamentally important. And it is how we do our politics and what you get, because the first past the post system is incredibly unfair. I can see I'm not convincing you here.
No, I'm worried about people switching over.
I know.
We're talking about electoral reform, not just in the hall.
It is so dull.
Big boxing gloves. Come on,
almost as dull as Keir Starmer. And of course, he will ignore it. He will ignore the vote.
Well, he said that.
Anyway.
He said that.
So what was the point of it?
We should have a fairer voting system, so every vote counts.
Is the political or the economic backdrop to this party conference, is it helpful or a hindrance to Keir Starmer's speech? He would have hoped to be on the front pages of the newspapers today. He isn't, because everyone's panicking about mortgage offers being withdrawn.
I noticed on the TV news last night, the Labour conference was about 20 minutes in. So, because it's not happening. It reminds me a little bit of Black Wednesday in 1992, the Liberal Democrat conference. They carried on with their debate on animal cruelty to people in the hall, while the pound had fallen out of the exchange rate mechanism. It was chaos. But I think actually this will guarantee that Starmer gets voice in the debate tonight, in the discussion, because he'll have to say something about sterling.
It's hugely helpful. The fact that the government imploded so early,
It hasn't imploded.
a new prime minister,
It hasn't imploded.
That special financial
It has not
statement
imploded. It's still there. It's still
massive.
intact. Nobody's resigned.
That has given them a spring in the step.
I love that's a low bar.
Yeah,
I know what
nobody's
that is,
resigned.
No one's resigned.
I know what some of these Tories are like. Nobody's resigned. Yeah, it's
This
exactly.
is desperate. I mean, I've seen the drowning man clutching a straw now.
And of course, they've got the Tory conference next week where they can recalibrate, refocus.
Yes.
And of course, she's not a great speaker either.
No, that's true. And will you both come on and entertain us at Tory party conference?
Yeah.
as well?
Oh, look
'Cause-
forward to
because
it.
we can't get enough of you two.
Thank you.
That's Kevin Maguire from The Mirror and Andrew Pearce from The Mail. Coming up after the break, we'll be looking ahead to that keynote speech expected just after 2 from the Labour leader, Keir Starmer. That's after a short break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you.
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales,
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to GB Newsday. Everyone getting very excited, of course, at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Just minutes away now from Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and his keynote speech. That's coming up at 2 o'clock. But let's hear now from a former Labour advisor, author, broadcaster and journalist, Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett, thank you for joining us. And I'm sure you won't mind me saying that you, like me, remember 1997. Are you getting echoes of that glorious Cool Britannia era?
Well, there's certainly echoes of a conference that feels that it's about to go into government. I mean, it's been so long since I've been at a conference where everybody is just saying it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I mean, they are so positive, and everybody is worried about upsetting the apple cart. So nobody heckled during the national anthem. Everybody just sang. It's been an incredible conference.
Yeah, and just on that everyone behaving themselves, Andrew making the point there when he was speaking with Kevin that, Keir Starmer, bit dull. It's not the sort of razzmatazz and showbiz element that we had with the Blair years, is it?
No, I mean, but Blair was an incredible orator. But actually, what I mean, it's not that Keir isn't dull, but I think it'll be this afternoon that he really finds his feet, because actually, when he gets talking, I mean, when his tribute to the Queen in Parliament was easily the best, right? He actually captured the mood. And I think that he's got much, much more confidence. I think it's been very difficult. He was, basically, he was a rookie MP who became leader very fast and had to learn everything very fast. And I think he's now settled down. He feels more confident. A lot of people were very surprised at how far.
I think we've got an interruption on the signal there with Scarlett. Let's see if we can just get back to her. Scarlett, can you hear us? No, clearly that's just dropped out. We'll try and reconnect to Scarlett. Scarlett, can you hear us now? I think we've trying to get the connection back with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Apologies for that. An interruption on the signal. Perhaps the Tory party trying to jam what you're saying. But just to get back to what we were talking about, Keir Starmer. I mean, part of the problem is, we're looking at the Labour Party lead, 17 points ahead in this Times poll, but he's not doing quite as well on his personal poll ratings.
No, but I think he's coming through. I mean, you noticed that when he was up against Boris Johnson, that actually by the end he was ahead of him on everything, right? And it's the same thing. I can understand people are wary, people are bored of politics, people don't quite know what to make of things. What they want, as is shown in the polls, is they want a government that looks after them, and it's what they haven't got at the moment.
Is that what he's really got to do? Rather than sort of detailed policy announcements, he's got to try and inspire, given what many are saying is an open political goal with the state of the economy now?
Yeah, what he's got to do this afternoon, and I'm sure he's going to, is he's got to be the Prime Minister in waiting. No question about it. Is that it's not about making jokes. It's not about razzmatazz. It's about, I can walk into number 10 and I will change things, and I will make it so that we have an economy that works. We will get rid of this completely mad economics that we've seen for the last week or so, that obviously, has absolutely spooked the markets nationally and internationally. And so Keir will walk in, and what you will see this afternoon is a man who is ready to govern, and that will be the tone of the speech. So no, you're not going to get lots of razzmatazz. You're not going to get lots of jokes. It will not be dull. It will not be boring. It will be forceful, because this is a man who knows where he wants to go.
OK, well, we talked about the ghosts of 1997. What about the ghosts of Jeremy Corbyn, momentum and the left? Has that all gone away now?
It really has. It's quite incredible. It's just gone. It's so yesterday, Momentum backed a motion for PR, for a different way of voting, and that went through the conference hall, but it went through very quietly, and there hasn't been any denouncements. There's been, and even you walk into conference, so you used to have lots of unions sort of making a fuss, or lots and lots of leafleting. All that's gone. Actually, it's quite interesting. The Corbyn era is absolutely gone.
OK, we remember what happened, of course, with Neil Kinnock and his conference speech, go away and prepare for power. Are there those still there in Liverpool saying, be a little cautious about this, we're not quite there yet?
Oh yeah. But like Blair, I was saying to a journalist that when I met Blair in '96 and said, well, of course you're going to win, I was told off. You never ever say that. And it's exactly the same with Keir, is you don't say you're going to win. But what he does feel is that people now are beginning to believe it. And I think a year ago, people were hoping, but I don't think anybody quite believed it. And I now think that basically the conference thinks it's possible. And you will see that every time Keir makes even what is a bad joke, he will get laughed. Every time he makes an announcement, he will get claps. And then he will get a massive standing ovation at the end. People in this conference really want him to succeed. They are on his side. And that's been the change while he's been leader.
Scarlett, as ever, thank you very much indeed for bringing us your assessment. Good to speak to you again. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's stay in Liverpool, head back to the conference proper. Gloria is there for us, of course. And just bearing in mind what Scarlett was saying there, Gloria, I mean, is this a sort of tangible sense of excitement there?
Well, yes, remember the people who are queuing to join the conference hall and to hear that speech, they knock on doors. They have been knocking on doors for decades, some of them, and Labour haven't won an election since 2005. There's an entire generation that have never known a Labour government. So, of course, they are excited and they will do the applause and they'll be so warm in their reception of Keir Starmer, but they don't matter. Because they're going to vote Labour. They work for Labour, they knock on doors for Labour. It's the people in the country that have to be moved. That's Keir Starmer's challenge today, I think, Mark.
And do you think we're going to get a big idea, some kind of message from him as well as detailed policy?
Well, you know, the sort of message that they seem incredibly keen to stress is that of responsibility, as opposed to what they suggest is a Conservative government, which is being reckless. Now, in my view, you have to not just emphasise responsibility, you need responsibility and radicalism. You need to inspire and reassure. It's always a difficult line to walk, but I would say that's Labour's challenge. And of course, do not get intoxicated by that 17-point lead in the polls.
Yeah.
Polls come and go, they go up and down. They should be stressing no complacency today.
Yeah, as Andrew Pearce was pointing out to you, of course, but exciting stuff in this next hour, which you're going to take us through, of course.
Yes, of course. We'll take you live as soon as Keir Starmer, who wants to be your next Prime Minister, gets to his feet. But to run up to that, I can chat, we can all chat with our friends and colleagues, Liam Halligan and Tom Harwood. Liam, is it helpful or a hindrance that the backdrop to this speech is loads of market turmoil and economic turmoil? It knocks Labour off the front pages.
I think it is helpful. Look, the fact that the pound has been under enormous pressure, more importantly even than that, the fact that borrowing costs have been going up. People like me have been going on television and the radio telling mortgage holders, young families, that the monthly direct debit from their mortgage company is going to be a lot higher potentially. All that is, of course, very worrying, but it does create a big political opportunity for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer's going to be quoting Tony Blair today. He's going to be calling himself Labour Party the political wing of the British people. But above and beyond everything else, Labour have to convince run-of-the-mill, centre-ground voters that they can run the economy responsibly, that they can beat the Tories on their home ground of economic competence. And there's nothing that says that the Tories are losing their reputation for economic competence like a weakening pound and people like me talking about turmoil on financial markets. So I think this is a huge opportunity today for Keir Starmer.
Tom, making a speech when you're 17 points ahead in the opinion polls, that must feel superficially good. That must make you feel confident, make him feel confident.
There's certainly an aura of confidence here in this room. We've just seen the length of the queue to get in to see Sir Keir Starmer speak, so long that they had to form a supplementary queue for the queue. And I went over and I spoke to a few people in this queue for the queue. I spoke to one woman who'd actually queued for the Queen just a couple of weeks ago. I asked her which one she felt would be more exciting for her, which one would be a better experience, although she said she had to leave the queue for the Queen after a couple of hours, but was hoping to get in to the speech to see Sir Keir Starmer today. There's something about us, I think, as British people, that just queuing is something we can't help but do. But yes,
we do it so well.
We do it.
We never anticipated that Tom Harwood would become our Q correspondent, did we? But I mean, you can't stop him talking about flipping queues. What's he going to say, Tom?
An opportunity, he goes for it. What can we say?
What's he going to... Oh, we can see just in the hall there. These are sort of the warm-up... a bit of a warm-up act, really. Sort of young members giving that impression of a party which has youth and diversity on its side.
And it's all about this sense of energy and moving forward. Momentum, some might say. Now, a couple of years ago, the word momentum to a Labour Party conference meant something very different to what it means now. Of course, it was the campaign that grew out of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership campaign. But the sense of momentum in politics away from that organisation is very, very important. The idea that this is a party that sees itself as a party of government. There's something called the strong horse theory of politics, which means that if it seems to be that you are the party that is doing well, you get a sort of bandwagon effect sometimes. And good news begets positivity. That is the bandwagon that the Labour Party will be trying to sustain today. They don't want to make any too big moves that might knock it off course. If anything, softly, gently is the approach that they will be taking. Sir Keir Starmer, sometimes criticised for not being enthusiastic enough, for not being charismatic enough, but frankly, he doesn't need to be all that enthusiastic or showmanship today.
Let's discuss that. Loads of talk of responsibility, not that much talk about radicalism.
I think it will be a very non-radical speech. There'll be lots of unusual Labour clap lines like "We are the party of fiscal responsibility," clap, 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 clap. That's what the Labour leadership, the Labour High Command wants to see beamed around the country, as you say, Gloria, because the real audience is across the country, not the Labour Party faithful here. Also, the party will be looking to avoid gaffes. And we should mention there's been, quite a lot of controversy on the Labour fringe, with one Labour MP saying stuff about Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, saying that he's only a superficially black man.
Because of the way that he sounds.
Because he is seen to be backing, in the eyes of Rupa Huq, that Labour MP in West London, in her view, wealthier people close to the City of London, etc. Of course, he went to Eton on a scholarship. And I think that's precisely the kind of messaging that the Labour Party will be trying to douse down as Keir Starmer really faces his most important
speech. You can probably, look at all the shadow cabinet there, Yvette Cooper, Wes Streeting, you can see them clapping their hands. They normally play a video of sort of all the best bits of the leader in anticipation of the leader walking on to great fanfare. It's about as close to
being a
actual
rock star.
Showbiz. Yeah, exactly. That's the analogy that I was trying to find.
People, don't they?
So this is pretty standard. It's designed to make the room feel good about itself and get them in that energetic mood, ready to welcome and shower their leader with the applause.
In an energetic mood. Last year, Sir Keir Starmer was on his feet for 1.25 hours. Now, we're not expecting it to be that long today.
Please no.
But clearly,
please no. The season's changed during that speach last year.
But clearly,
I was
lots of clap lines.
The whole speech, because it was just the speech. I didn't even get the chance to come back.
You should demand compensation.
What's happening? Let's have a look at those pictures.
Clearly, what we're going to see is a lot of applause in this speech. There'll be moments where there are these clap lines in the speech where they're expecting applause. There'll be pauses, and no doubt it will be rapturous. The big question is, will there be heckles like last year? Last year there were 5 or 6 different heckles.
There he is, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, going through. I'm going to stop talking. Have a listen.
Thank you, conference. Thank you, Satvir. Thanks for everything you're doing for our party. And thank you, conference. It's great to be here in Liverpool. After all the changes we've made, all the hard work that we've put in, finally, we're seeing the results. Yes, conference. We can say it at last. Arsenal are top of the league. But before I begin, I want to address something important. This is our first conference in Liverpool since 2018. That means it's our first conference since this city's call for justice for the 96 became justice for the 97. For For too long, this city has been let down. So when Labour wins the next election, one of my first acts as Prime Minister will be to put the Hillsborough Law on the statute book. I know how much this matters. I've spent a lifetime helping those who've been failed by the system. I worked with Stephen Lawrence's family and Jane Clough's to get them justice. I promise you, we will get this city the justice it deserves. Conference, we've seen two sides of Britain in the last few weeks. On one side, a nation united by a profound purpose to pay its respects to a remarkable sovereign. And that queue, 5 miles at its peak, even in death, our Queen found a unique way to capture the British spirit. But Conference, the other side of Britain never went away. A Britain all at sea, where a cloud of anxiety hangs over working people. At moments of uncertainty like this, we must provide clear leadership. We must stand with working people, meet their ambitions for real change, walk towards a better future, and build a new Britain together. A Britain that is fairer, greener, more dynamic, and that isn't afraid to use the power of government to help working people succeed. Because we can't go on like this. What we've seen in the past few days has no precedent. The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? They've crashed the pound. And for what? Higher interest rates, higher inflation, higher borrowing. And for what? Not for you, not for working people, for tax cuts for the richest 1% in our society. Don't forget, don't forgive. The only way to stop this is with a Labour government. And our problems don't end there. Raw sewage in our rivers and seas, backlogs everywhere, at our borders, in our courts, in our hospitals, crimes like burglary, totally unpunished, people told to drive themselves to hospital after a heart attack, and millions of families, pensioners, the poorest in our society, still facing the coldest winter of their lives. I said on Sunday that a fitting tribute to the late Queen would be to turn our collar up and face the storm. And we will. Because Britain never won its battles with wishful thinking. Our success comes, first and foremost, from the hard work, the graft, and the common sense of the British people. A common sense that teachers up and down the country drum into their pupils. Fail to prepare, and you prepare to fail. Conference, that's how the Tories have governed our country for 12 long years. That's why our economy has been more brittle than others in the face of crisis. They used to lecture us about fixing the roof when the sun was shining. But take a look around Britain. They haven't just failed to fix the roof. They've ripped out the foundations, smashed through the windows, and now they've blown the doors off for good measure. Conference. My government will be different. We will run towards the challenges of tomorrow. We will get us out of this endless cycle of crisis. And we will do it with a fresh start, a new set of priorities, and a new way of governing. But it won't be easy. And the first step must be to tackle the cost of living crisis. Now, the Prime Minister has finally accepted there's no alternative to Labour's plan to freeze energy prices. When she was arguing against handouts, Labour provided the clarity our nation needed. We said this winter, not a penny more on anyone's bills. But politics about choices. And the choice, the political choice, is who pays. Working people or the oil and gas companies making huge profits from higher prices. The head of BP has said that this crisis is a cash machine for his company. But that's a cash machine fed by working people. So our choice, the only choice, the Labour choice, is to put those profits to work. This party is always on the side of working people in times of crisis. And conference, I know this will shock you, but the Tories aren't on the side of the NHS either. My mum worked in the NHS. My sister worked in the NHS. My wife still works in the NHS. The NHS runs through our family like a stick of rock. But I tell you what, I'm really worried about how many lives are at risk this winter. Talking to doctors in my local hospital, I said, the NHS is on its knees, isn't it? And they said, no, Keir, it's face down on the floor. And the pathetic response of the government last week left it there. The way to get it back to its feet is with a stronger NHS workforce. That is the main barrier to capacity right now, staff. So as Rachel announced yesterday, we will take on an extra 7,500 medical students every year. We will double the number of district nurses. 5,000 new health visitors, 10,000 extra nursing placements. And conference, I'll tell you this, if it's a choice between a tax cut for those earning hundreds of thousands of pounds or supporting our NHS, that's not a hard choice for us. Labour will always deliver for our NHS. But these are just the first steps on a much bigger journey. The next Labour government must restore our sense of collective hope. We should never be left cowering in a brace position. It's time for Britain to stand tall again, to believe in ourselves again, to chart a new course and to get our future back. Now, some of you have heard this before. I grew up in a Pebble Dash semi. Dad was a toolmaker. Mum was a nurse. Our first car was a Ford Cortina. It was the 1970s. So I remember what rising prices feel like. I remember when our phone was cut off because we couldn't pay the bill. How hard it was to make ends meet. It wasn't easy. But there's something else I remember about being working class in the 1970s. Hope. Not a grandiose, utopian dream kind of hope. A hope that was ordinary, basic, taken for granted. Because like all families, although we had our ups and downs, my parents never doubted for 1 second that things would get better. And you know what? They were right. They worked their socks off and gave me the gift of opportunity. And that gift drives me to make sure no one anywhere in this country is held back by their circumstances. That's not just words, it's the story of my life. And I don't think these values are special. The opportunity to get on is what everyone wants for their family. It's more than a British value. It's what we tell our children. Work hard and you can achieve anything. Work hard and you will get a fair chance in Britain. My parents didn't just believe this, it comforted them. But is it still true? I don't think so. After 12 long years, our spirit is ground down. When I talk to working people now, they tell me they work harder and harder just to stand still, that their graft can't provide their family with a sense of security, that they're worried their kids won't have a better life than them. Conference, what does it say about Britain when families worry like this about their children's future? It says an unwritten contract is broken. A contract where in return for hard work you get on, where your contribution is always respected, and which reaches through the generations to say Britain will always be better for your children. That's the deep cost of Tory failure. They keep talking about aspiration, but they don't understand how they've choked it off for working people. And it gets worse, because the other thing people say is politics can't do anything about it. They don't think real change is possible anymore. And who can blame them? Just look at what they've been through. They were told we're all in this together, yet they paid for the mess made by bankers. They cried out for economic change in a referendum, but their calls went unanswered. They united to defeat a virus, only to see the government break all the rules that they respected. And now this, the biggest hit to their living standards in a century. And it turns out there is money for the top 1%. Now, I'm not going to stand here and pretend the awful conflict in Ukraine is not the immediate spark of the cost of living crisis. We will never allow Putin's threats and imperialism to succeed. We will stand alongside Ukraine's people, fighting on the front line of Britain. So let this entire conference say together, Slava Ukraini! The conference. I will never accept that the war is an excuse for how unprepared Britain was to tackle the fallout. The war didn't ban offshore wind. The war didn't scrap home insulation. The war didn't stall nuclear energy. The Tories did that. And in their budget last week, they sent out a new message. A message that echoes around the kitchens and workplaces of families right across the country and says, your struggles, your hopes, your ambitions don't matter to us. We are not here for you. You are not our people. We are here for those at the top, and the rest of you can shove off. And conference, make no mistake about it. In one bold move on Friday, the Tory party gave up on any claim it may have had to be a party of aspiration. So we need to get moving. That's the other thing my background gives me, impatience. If you're born without privilege, you don't have time for messing around. You don't walk around problems without fixing them. And you don't surrender to the instincts of organisations that won't face up to change. As a human rights lawyer, I took on governments who wanted to keep the barbaric practice of death by hanging. In Northern Ireland, I worked alongside others to make sure the police service worked for all communities. As Director of Public Prosecutions, I overhauled the handling of sexual violence cases to make them work better for victims. And this working class impatience is what drives me in this job too. Now, Conference, I knew in April 2020, when I became leader of this party, we had a big task before us. We had to change our party and prepare for power all in one go. Not change for change's sake. Change with a purpose. To make our party fit to serve our country. That's why we had to rip out anti-Semitism by its roots. That's why we had to show our support for NATO is non-negotiable. Show we want business to prosper. Shed unworkable policy. Country first, party second. And I didn't do this alone. Conference, we did it together. And it shows. We've taken councils in Scotland, in Wales, in every part of England, from Southampton to Stevenage, Wrexham to Wolverhampton. We've shown Labour can win again anywhere. We won in Wakefield with Simon, our first by-election gain for a decade, Simon. But people need more. They're crying out for change, looking for decisive leadership. They need to know we can be a reforming government with clear answers to the big challenges they face, that we can grow the economy and raise living standards for everyone, not just a privileged few. Tackle climate change by creating new jobs, new industries, new opportunities. Redesign our public services to unleash opportunity and provide security. Restore faith in politics as a force for good. Get Britain's hope, its confidence, and its future back. So, Conference, imagining that we're looking back at the first term of the next Labour government. How is Britain different? I'll tell you. We've defeated the cost of living crisis and the clouds of anxiety have lifted. Services are there when you need them. Our economy is stable again. Business has the certainty to invest. The NHS is back in good health. And people are starting to raise their sights, believe in Britain again. Britain is fairer. People feel they can get on. There's more opportunity, more affordable housing, fairer taxes, higher wages, jobs more secure. Families can aspire again, look forward with hope again. And Britain is greener. We're leading the world on climate change. People look at us and follow our example. New jobs, industries, technologies benefit all parts of the country. We're proving net zero can be achieved, and the most precious gift to the next generation is within our grasp, a safer, more prosperous world to live in. And because we're fairer, because we are greener, we're also more dynamic. Our entrepreneurial spirit unleashed, new technology improving public services, cutting-edge science and world-class services driving economic growth. And working people are respected as the people who create the wealth that drives Britain forward. And there's one more thing, something important. People have started to notice it's possible to govern with integrity. To unite rather than divide, to respect other points of view, to see that long-term plans trump short-term fixes, that decline is not inevitable. Yes, some people will say politicians are all the same, but not as many. In Grimsby a few months ago, I was really struck by a woman I met. She said something which was really simple. I don't just want to survive, I want to live. As I got back on the train, that phrase went round and round in my head. I don't just want to survive, I want to live. Conference, I want to look her in the eyes after 5 years of a Labour government, and I want to know that she and millions of people like her are not just surviving, they're thriving. That's the difference a Labour government will make. That's the Britain we're fighting for. Conference, let's be honest, missions don't achieve themselves. You need focus, determination, and the courage to make very difficult choices, particularly when managing the country's finances. Rachel Reeves and I have set out a framework for sound money. We're determined to reduce debt as a share of our economy. Every policy we announce will be fully costed. And we will set up an office for value for money to make sure public spending targets the national interest. And we should be clear about what that means. It means not being able to do things, good Labour things, as quickly as we might like. That's what responsible government looks like. Because if you lose control of the economy, if you act irresponsibly, as the Tories have done in spectacular fashion, then you lose the ability to do anything, and working people pay the price. We will not let that happen. We will only borrow to invest when it's in the long-term national interest, when the cost of not investing makes it much more expensive for the next generation. Conference, the Labour Party is at its best when we glimpse the future and lead our country towards it. In 1945, out of the rubble of the Second World War, we built a land fit for heroes. In 1964, we harnessed the white heat of technology to pay our way in a modern economy. And in 1997, we modernised a country held back by crumbling public services and outdated institutions. It's time. It's time to write a new chapter of Labour Party history about how we built a fairer, greener, more dynamic Britain by tackling the climate emergency head-on and used it to create the jobs, the industries and the opportunities of the future. I come at this not just as leader of the Labour Party, but also as a father. As a father, I'm spurred on by the voices of our children, the cry of indignation, demanding our generation act before it's too late. As Labour leader, I see it as a matter of justice and opportunity, about the fairness and better society that I came into politics to create, the biggest opportunity we've had in decades to make this country work for working people. Across the world, countries are already gearing up to meet this challenge. We cannot afford to miss out, because some nation is going to lead the world in offshore wind. Why not this one? Some nation will win the race for electric vehicles. Why not us? Some nation will be the first to harness new hydrogen power. Why not Britain? Conference. That's why today I'm so proud to launch our Green Prosperity Plan, a plan that will turn the UK into a green growth superpower. And driving the plan forward is a goal that will put us ahead of any major economy in the world. 100% clean power by 2030. A huge national effort. A huge national effort. An effort that will double Britain's onshore wind capacity, treble solar power, quadruple offshore wind, invest in tidal, hydrogen, nuclear, back carbon capture, commit to green steel production, new renewable ports, new gigafactories, and insulate 19 million homes. Working with Ed Miliband and his team, we'll make sure this energy revolution powers up all parts of the country. Let's get clean hydrogen energy into South Yorkshire, into the east of England, across the river in the Wirral. Offshore wind in Scotland, Teesside, east and North Yorkshire. Solar power growing in rural communities in the south east, the south west and the Midlands. This will require a different way of working, the biggest partnership between government, business and communities this country has ever seen. It will mean new jobs, more than 1 million new jobs. Training for plumbers, electricians, engineers, software designers, technicians and builders. It will all start within the first 100 days of a new Labour government. And what will it mean for working people? Cheaper bills and higher living standards. Take home insulation. And I saw this for myself on Abbey Road. Not that one. This one's on a council estate in Kirklees, where the Labour Council had the good Yorkshire foresight to do a real job on insulation. I went in January, it was freezing cold. I was invited in, the house was warm, the energy bills next to nothing, and the tenants were grinning from ear to ear. And why not? Over £1,000 off your winter fuel bill. What's not to like? Clean energy is already cheaper than fossil fuels, 9 times cheaper. We just need more of it. This is about fair growth, powered by clean British energy, everywhere in the country. That's what levelling up really looks like. Practical Labour solutions, not empty Tory slogans. And conference. As Rachel announced yesterday, a new British sovereign wealth fund will drive us forward on this mission. We will make sure that the public money we spend building up British industry spurs on private investment, stimulates growth in construction, life sciences, finance and insurance, and the British people enjoy the returns. We won't make the mistake the Tories made with North Sea oil and gas back in the 1980s, when they frittered away the wealth from our national resources. Just look at what's happening at the moment. The largest onshore wind farm in Wales, Who owns it? Sweden. Energy bills in Swansea are paying for schools and hospitals in Stockholm. The Chinese Communist Party has a stake in our nuclear industry. And 5 million people in Britain pay their bills to an energy company owned by France. So we will set up Great British Energy within the first year of a Labour government. A new company. A new company. Conference, a new company that takes advantage of the opportunities in clean British power. And because it is right for jobs, because it is right for growth, because it is right for energy independence from tyrants like Putin, then yes, Conference, Great British Energy will be publicly owned. Conference, none of this will be easy. It's not like flicking a switch. It will mean tough battles on issues like planning and regulation. But when the Tories naysay and carp, remember this. The road to net zero is no longer one of stern, austere self-denial. It's at the heart of modern 21st century aspiration. Technology has turned everything on its head. Green and growth don't just go together. They're inseparable. The future wealth of this country is in our air, in our seas, in our skies. Britain should harness that wealth and share it with all. British power to the British people. That's why I've always said we will fight the Tories on economic growth. Their record is appalling. The worst decade of growth in 2 centuries. Or, as the Chancellor puts it, a vicious cycle of stagnation. Now, I have to say, as a former prosecutor, it always warms my heart when somebody caught banged to rights pleads guilty at the first opportunity. And after 12 years, what's their big idea? Unlimited bonuses for bankers. Back the billionaires. Go easy on the oil and gas companies. It's a nonsense. Everyone earning less than £155,000 a year loses out with their plan. And they say they don't believe in redistribution, but they do, from the poor to the rich. And they're loading up the country with debt to pay for it. And what about those in the middle? They're losing £780. And Conference, I'm sure you've all heard that tape, where Liz Truss says Britain's working people lack skill and application. That the problem with our economy is they don't graft hard enough. Working people don't graft hard enough. No, we're not going to take this. This is the fight. If they want to fight us on redistribution, if they want to fight us on workers' rights, if they want to tell us working people don't come first, we'll take them on and we will win. And we will win not just because we have fairness on our side, but because we have economic reason on our side too. Trickle-down economics doesn't work. Britain won't be better off just because we make the rich richer. The real problem is we create too many jobs that are low-paid and insecure. We lock too many communities out of the wealth we create. And public services aren't strong enough to help working people succeed. That's why we struggle to grow. Our economic foundations are weak. And the Tory argument is, that's fine. If the City of London races ahead and the rest of the country stagnates, they think that's okay. Conference, they're the ones not prepared to graft, they're the ones not prepared to do the hard yards on growth. But we will. We will end the blight of low pay and insecure work with our New Deal for working people. We will transform the state so the decisions which drive growth in communities are made by local people with skin in the game. The people of Liverpool know what's best for Liverpool. And the same is true in Burnley, Sunderland, Peterborough and Plymouth. If we want fair growth everywhere, communities need a stake. And they need good, affordable housing for working people as well. I've seen home ownership rise almost my entire life. It's the bedrock of security and aspiration. That Pebble Dash semi meant everything to my family. But now, under the Tories, the dream of owning your own home is slipping away for too many. And that's a political choice. Because if you keep inflating demand without increasing supply, house prices will only rise, and homes become less affordable for working people. So we will set a new target, 70% home ownership, and we will meet it with a new set of political choices, a Labour set of political choices. No more buy-to-let landlords or second homeowners getting in first. We will back working people's aspirations. Help first-time buyers onto the ladder with a new mortgage guarantee scheme. Reform planning so speculators can't stop communities getting shovels in the ground. My message is this. If you're grafting every hour to buy your own home, Labour is on your side. Labour is the party of home ownership in Britain today. And let me say something about business too. Don't be fooled into thinking that they buy into the Tory trickle-down fantasy. Business leaders aren't knocking on my door saying they want to rip up employee rights. They don't tell me that the problems they face will be solved by corporation tax cuts. They want fair taxes, high skills, and the long-term confidence to invest. I want to be crystal clear about this. I'm not just pro-business, I want to partner with business. So we will scrap business rates, level the playing field for startups and the high street, give employers new flexibility to invest in world-class training they need. And as Johnny Reynolds said, invite them to drive forward our modern industrial strategy, a true partnership between government, businesses and trade unions. This isn't about the size of government. It's about what government can do. Government can support businesses to innovate and grow, can bring in the creative genius of our scientists and universities, can unite us to tackle the country's challenges on behalf of working people. Tory ideology is a barrier to growth. And I'll tell you another one. The mess they've made of our public services. Strong public services are the foundation of a successful economy, always. Deal with NHS waiting lists and growth improves. Invest in childcare so parents can go back to work and growth improves. More mental health support, world-class schooling, skills training when you need it, and growth improves. But we have to be honest. I would love to stand here and say Labour will fix everything. But the damage they've done to our finances and our public services means this time the rescue will be harder than ever. It will take investment. Of course it will. But it will also take reform. One, we need to recruit, train and motivate the very best doctors, nurses, teachers, police officers. Two, we need to get the best innovation in their hands, make technology work for us. Three, we need to make sure services are built around people's lives, empower them to meet the challenges of the future. And for and above all, we must shift towards a prevention-first policy. Now, I've seen this for myself. Early intervention saves lives and saves money. Every time I read a serious case review as Director of Public Prosecutions, the story was the same, just a change of name. Another life that could have gone in a different direction if someone had stepped in earlier. It's that kind of injustice that must drive us to think differently about our public services. In health, it's about moving treatment towards communities, exploring how technology can free up NHS workers to focus on care. In education, it means not just imparting knowledge, but developing the creativity, the resilience, the curiosity young people need in a modern world. In crime, it means a model of policing that can focus on prevention and give victims faith in a system that will not let violence go unpunished. At conference, the state of our public services show you exactly who the Tories are. Shows you they fundamentally don't believe government can help working people succeed. Every time they choose a new Prime Minister, and there's been plenty of them, you get a hymn of lip service to its power, usually from the steps of Downing Street itself. But as soon as the black door swings shut behind them, they retreat to their comfort zone. That's why they don't plan for the future. They don't believe it's their job. And so we lurch from crisis to crisis, always reacting, always behind the curve, a sticking plaster, never a cure. And if you want the totemic symbol of this, the single biggest failure to grasp the nettle, then look no further than Brexit. Conference, the policy of my Labour government will always be to make Brexit work. It's no secret I voted Remain, as the Prime Minister did. But what I heard around the country was people who thought we'd got our priorities wrong, who wanted democratic control over their lives, but who also wanted opportunities for the next generation, communities they felt proud of, public services they could rely on. I didn't hear that Brexit was about slashing workers' rights. I didn't hear people wanting to lower standards on food, animal welfare and the environment. I didn't hear them wanting to end redistribution. So I want to speak directly to the people who left Labour on this issue. Whether you voted Leave or Remain, you've been let down. And with Liz Truss, the Tories are changing the meaning of Brexit before your eyes. If you voted for a government to step in on your side, for better work, higher wages, more opportunities in your community, for an NHS that is modern and reliable, if you voted to take control of your life and for the next generation to have control of theirs, then I say to you, that is what I will deliver. I will make work pay for people who create this country's wealth. I will make sure we buy, make and sell more in Britain. I will revitalise public services and control immigration using a points-based system. I will spread power and opportunity to all our communities. And I will never be shy to use the power of government to help working people succeed. Labour will make Brexit work. Labour will deliver change. And you'll never get that from the Tories. And conference, you won't get it from the SNP either. Conference. The challenges we face, the cost of living crisis, climate change, standing up to Putin, are common across our four nations. We saw off the threat of fascism and deadly disease together. We built the NHS and the welfare state together. But I don't believe in our union just because of our history. I believe in it because of our future. I know we can meet the great challenges to come, build new beacons of fairness that light up the islands we share. Scotland needs a Labour government that can deliver change. But it also needs the power and resources to shape its own future, whoever is in power in Westminster. And the SNP are not interested in this. For them, Scotland's success in the UK is met with gritted teeth, seen as a roadblock to independence, and so they stand in the way. We can't work with them. We won't work with them. No deal under any circumstances. A fairer, greener, more dynamic Scotland in a fairer, greener, more dynamic Labour Britain. Conference on climate change, growth, aspiration, levelling up, Brexit, economic responsibility. We are the party of the centre ground. Once again, the political wing of the British people. And we can achieve great things. Yesterday, we even managed to get a Liverpool crowd cheering Gavin Neville. But let's not kid ourselves. The next 2 years will be tough. The Tories want a fifth term and they will stop at nothing to achieve it. And because of their record, because of the state of Britain, they're getting desperate. With so little that's good to defend, they will lash out. We need to be prepared, disciplined, focused. Spend every day working to earn the trust of the British people. Meet their attacks with hope. Provide the leadership this country so desperately needs. Because as in 1945, 1964, 1997, this is a Labour moment. So, conference. Say it loud and believe it. Britain will deal with the cost of living crisis. Britain will get its future back. A country where aspiration is rewarded, where working people succeed, a force for good in the world, a clean energy superpower, a fairer, greener, more dynamic nation. This is my commitment to you, the national mission of the next Labour government. And together with the British people, we will do it. Thank you, conference.
Keir Starmer being embraced by his wife, Victoria, there. She works in the National Health Service. He had a message for the country. It was a long message, it was a speech of about 50 minutes. He said on climate change, growth, aspiration, levelling up, Brexit, and economic responsibility, that Labour is the party of the centre ground. A message for his party. We need to be prepared, disciplined, focused, spend each day working to earn the trust of the British people. We can see there Keir Starmer, the man hoping you will elect him as your Prime Minister, walking through the hall. Of course they loved it. This is the Labour Party faithful. People in that hall are certain to vote Labour. They are members of the Labour Party, but it is you at home that need to have been moved by that speech. And for immediate reaction, as we stay on the pictures, watching a smiling Keir Starmer along with his wife, Victoria, we can get immediate reaction from the Mail's Andrew Pearce, our own economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Liam, what struck you about the economic messages?
I've been covering Labour conferences as a journalist since the mid-1990s, and there were definite nods there to Tony Blair. We are the political wing of the British people. This is a Labour moment. He talks about 1997 a lot. We are the party of home ownership, said Keir Starmer, as he unveiled a mortgage guarantee scheme for first-time buyers. Quite policy vague in general. It was high on rhetoric. The biggest cheer he got was when he talked about a great British energy company which will be publicly owned. A huge standing ovation for that.
He looks happy, doesn't he?
Some ideological red meat for the left of the party, talking about nationalising our energy industry. But when you think about it, Gloria, he talks about insulating 16 million homes and nationalisation. Some people would say, well, you thought Kwasi Kwarteng's latest statement would cost a lot of money. This would cost quite a lot of money too.
Andrew, we're still staying on the pictures for those people who are listening to us on radio. Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria, they are still walking after that speech, exiting on their way, a long journey out of the conference hall as they are greeted by a Labour Party faithful. He looks happy, the hall look happy, but it's the country that matters. Andrew Pearce, will Mail readers be happy?
Well, there wasn't much in it to get excited about, to be honest. That was a speech that seemed to me could have been made in any year, not a year where we've got this extraordinary fuel crisis, cost of living crisis. Liam said vague on policy. Policy light. One major announcement, the Great British Energy Company. But how's that going to work then? How's that going to cut my gas bill or anybody else's electric bill? Because it's nothing to do with the companies operating here. That's all to do with the international market, which is flawed and broken. And so there wasn't very much around that either. He said he'd get Brexit done. Well, hang on, his record on Brexit is pretty appalling because he tried to have a second referendum. I mean, let's be honest, he's not a great speaker, is he? He's flat.
Nor is Liz Truss.
Nor is Liz Truss.
And neither are great orators.
Neither are great orators. The best thing about it was only 50 minutes this year, because last year it was 90 minutes, and I think most of us had fallen asleep halfway through it. And I think he's just relieved it's done, because it isn't his greatest strength. But if the Tories weren't in quite such a crisis as they were over the threat to sterling, I don't think Liz Truss and Number 10 would be looking at that speech and thinking there's much to worry about.
Well, perhaps the job now for the Labour Party is not to be exciting, not to unveil some great shopping list of policies, just to appear stable, maybe a bit boring, but arguably they could say we're responsible. This is not about razzmatazz. We're just wanting to show we are in the centre ground of politics.
One of the truisms of a lot of political strategy is that you let the government incumbent beat themselves. Labour just want to sit back and not mess things up. Try and push back on gaffes, push back on any dissent from the left wing of the party that would unnerve the centre ground of British politics. I was amazed at some of the Blairite language in that speech. I agree with Andrew. He hasn't got Tony Blair's razzmatazz and charisma. We both spend a lot of time covering Tony Blair, and of course you knew Tony Blair personally, Gloria, having been an MP for so many years. But it strikes me that some of the rhetoric was it could have offended a Labour audience typically, but I do feel, Andrew, there's a sense of good behaviour and discipline now instilling itself.
Yeah. I'm going to go now to Tom Harwood, who is with people who have been listening to that speech. Tom, Can you hear me,
Gloria,
Tom?
I can indeed. I'm standing in the throng of people who've been leaving that hall, a very excited crowd here. I'm delighted to be joined by this lady who have been listening, and you really liked what you heard.
I really, really did. The best part of it was when we were talking about make Brexit work. We should have been talking such a long time about a Labour Brexit, because as Keir said, whether you would leave or remain, you have been let down. And we are finally talking about making the best of it. It's done. We voted 70% leave in areas like mine, and the Labour Party haven't listened for long enough. I've been angry about it. I've been shouting and shouting, and now the Labour Party is listening. If you voted leave, we are there for you as much as if you voted remain. We just want to make Brexit work.
Does it matter that Keir Starmer was the man pushing most for a second referendum?
I was a candidate in Ashfield in 2019, and people said to me, it isn't about you, Duck. It's about the party and the fact that you are pushing for a second referendum. And they didn't feel listened to, and then we elected a leader that they felt didn't listen to them. And I was heartbroken, because while we could be out changing lives and making the real difference that communities like ours needed, we were absolutely ripped apart by Brexit, and we finally get it. We are listening as a Labour Party. We understand you, whether you live in Bolsover, whether you live in Ashfield. If you voted leave, we're going to make a difference to your life as much as anybody else's, and we're sorry that we ever got it wrong.
Do you think people will hear that message today? Will that message get out beyond this room?
We have got a really, really tough 2 years. Keir was talking about how hard it's going to be. The country is in a mess. We've got a job as activists to get out and speak to people, tell them that now, the areas like mine, my home that voted 70% leave, we are your party. You trusted the Tories. They told you they'd deliver Brexit. They told you they had an oven-ready Brexit deal, and they lied. And now Labour is a party that you come to, and we'll deliver it when they didn't.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. We'll try and get some more views from the hall, but a really, really fascinating case there. The pitch that the Labour Party, that Brexit is safe with the Labour Party here. Excuse me, sir, what did you make of the speech?
I thought it's brilliant. It's what we've been waiting for a long, long time. Absolutely phenomenal.
What was your standout moment?
I think the announcement on GB Energy, publicly owned energy company, absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us here. Excuse me, what did you make of the speech? What did you make of the speech?
Absolutely excellent. It just shows that Labour are on their way to number 10, and we're absolutely delighted. Thanks, Keir.
Well, there we go. A little bit of a flavour of the audience coming out here. Let's pass back to Liam Halligan now, who has some more analysis.
Yes, hello everybody. Sorry to disappoint. It's not Liam Halligan. He is sat next to me though. Patrick Christie's here live from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, and loads of stuff to get stuck into there. We've just heard Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, making his keynote speech, setting out his vision for the UK. He said the Conservative government has lost control of the UK's economy. He said they ripped the roof off, knocked the walls down, blew the doors out as well. He also stated that Labour is fighting for a Britain where people are not simply surviving, they are thriving. People want to thrive, and the Labour leader also pledged to set up a great British energy company, more than a whiff of nationalisation there. That was going to be in the first year of a Labour government. He also claimed the party will turn the UK into a green growth superpower. Green has been a big word here at Labour Party conference, not just because I'm looking at a fake field that the NFU have set up over there with 100% clean power by 2030. We can now go to Liam Halligan and Andrew Pearce, who join me here. Liam, I will start with you, our economics and business editor. He smashed the Tories, didn't he, for essentially driving the country, crashing the pound, he said. Anything in that stands out for you? I mean, the nationalisation, for example, of Great British Energy will be a big one.
I agree with you. I think that was the sort of main ideological moment of the speech. It's the part of the speech that got the loudest cheer when he said he wanted to nationalise part of our energy industry. He really made Kwasi Kwarteng suffer for cutting the top additional rate of income tax, something that a lot of Conservative MPs are nervous doesn't really capture the mood of the nation when so many families are struggling. Yeah. Keir Starmer says the biggest cost of living crisis in a century, but the same old Tories find money for the top 1%. It doesn't matter that cutting the top rate of income tax may actually increase the Treasury's tax take, because that's what often happens when you cut the top rate of tax. But it was a good piece of political knockabout. In general, As I said to Gloria just a few moments ago, I thought it was very, very light on policy, very, very high on rhetoric, with one or two red meat moments to throw to the left wing of his party, and winning that electoral, securing that electoral success, ushering in the first Labour victory since 2005, will depend overwhelmingly on controlling the left of his party so they don't scare off the centre ground of British politics.
Absolutely. I was talking to people a bit earlier on in that queue on their way in. I was asking them simply, what do you want? We're going to play clips of that a bit later on to see if he delivered on that. And a lot of them said, we just want to win. And Andrew Pearce joins me here now. There are economic stuff I'm going to return to you about, but Andrew, just for this now, we've got things like, potentially controlled immigration with a points-based system, not reversing Brexit, no Indy Ref 2 for Scotland we've had as well there. Can you see a bit more dynamism from Keir Starmer?
I don't think I'd ever use the word dynamism and Keir Starmer in the same sentence, because he's anything but. He's a dull, boring public speaker. That's the truth, and it was a dull speech. But the Sturgeon thing was very important, because the Tories will play very hard. If we look like we could potentially be in a hung parliament, that they'll paint the dreaded image of Nicola Sturgeon being in coalition with the Labour government, and he's emphatically ruled that out. That was quite an important statement, actually, because the Tories play that very hard with Jeremy Corbyn. If you vote for Corbyn,
coalition of chaos.
And that's something my newspaper is very concerned about too. So that was quite strong. The energy company, that's not the first time now we've heard about nationalisation, because of course they're going to take the railways back into public ownership. That's been like the okey-cokey, in, out, and now finally it's going to go back into public ownership. That will be popular. I don't really know that the Great British Energy Company is going to be terribly popular, because I don't see how that does anything to deal with soaring energy bills.
Great in it for a start. I mean, that helps. I suppose that's the initial thing. A bit of PR, and he's got the union flag behind him as well, which has been a big theme. Goes well with the national anthem that we saw.
Great British Bake Off. There were other pieces of red meat for the left. You had the National Wealth Fund, which harks back to Tony Benn, actually, a real figurehead of the left of the Labour Party, of course a huge figure in the 1980s. He wanted to have a national wealth fund to harness North Sea oil wealth. So I think that was an interesting move as well. And then it was Labour trying to place themselves in the centre ground of British politics, particularly with younger voters, saying that they are now the party of home ownership.
Yeah, very interesting.
With that mortgage guarantee scheme for first-time buyers. But again, Patrick, very light on the detail.
Well, absolutely. But the timing of that, again, Liam, in terms of what the banks did today, I know we'll talk about that a bit later on. But I just want to play you a quick clip. Sir Keir Starmer also used his speech to big up his credentials as a leader. He spoke of how the Tories have now lost any claim that they had to being a party of aspiration. That was a key dividing point before, wasn't it? And how his working class impatience, I should say patience, has equipped him to be a party leader. Let's just hear what he had to say here. Some quite interesting points. He did also bang on a lot about how much the NHS courses through his veins. Let's hear this.
And conference, make no mistake about it. In one bold move on Friday, the Tory party gave up on any claim it may have had to be a party of aspiration. So we need to get moving. That's the other thing my background gives me, impatience. If you're born without privilege, you don't have time for messing around. You don't walk around problems without fixing them. And you don't surrender to the instincts of organisations that won't face up to change. As a human rights lawyer, I took on governments who wanted to keep the barbaric practice of death by hanging. In Northern Ireland, I worked alongside others to make sure the police service worked for all communities. As Director of Public Prosecutions, I overhauled the handling of sexual violence cases to make them work better for victims. And this working class impatience is what drives me in this job too. Now,
Right, well, there we heard Keir Starmer giving himself the big up there. But one of the big criticisms of Sir Keir over the years has been the fact that he's a very, very dull man. So wooden that sometimes, occasionally, birds have been spotted trying to nest in him. Andrew Pearce has also given his view on this particular issue. Liam, I'll throw it over to you. Let's talk about Keir's oomph. Did he have any?
he had more than normal, but he clearly has to try hard to raise the octane level. Look, as Gloria said earlier, and it's an absolutely bang-on observation, he was speaking to a hall of the Labour Party faithful, people that knock on doors, people whose social life is the Labour Party, people who are nailed on Labour voters for the most part. It's all about the people at home. And whatever you think about Tony Blair, and a lot of GB News viewers and listeners will have mixed feelings about Tony Blair, Andrew and I can tell you, we watched him as journalistic colleagues. He filled the room. There was an electricity when Tony Blair spoke. There was really soaring rhetoric, and you would feel yourself moved, even if you're not a natural Labour voter. I felt none of that, unfortunately, with the best will in the world with Keir Starmer. It was a perfectly competent speech, but this is a Labour moment. He said it, but when he said it, it looked as if he didn't really mean it. And if you can't create electricity in the room when the Tories are overseeing a fall in sterling, and people like me talking about the government not being able to sell its debt going forward, then when can you create electricity?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, you could argue whether or not we could afford the electricity bill for Blair these days, of course. And look, I know a thing or two about it being patently obvious when someone's reading off an auto cue. But to be fair, he's going up against Liz Truss now, not bombastic Boris. So is that enough, what we've just seen and heard in that?
Well, she's no great public speaker either, as you know. And it was quite interesting when he was talking about being working class, because a lot of people think Keir Starmer is a posh bloke because of his knighthood. When he first became Labour leader, his aides would always tell people like me, please don't call him sir in public, which of course meant I would call him sir in public, always. Definitely. Take the knighthood, mate, you've got to use the title. So he's desperate to try and show that he is a man of the people. But as Liam was saying, his father was a toolmaker, but his father owned the factory. So I mean, my father was working class. He worked on the assembly line in British Leyland. He still hasn't quite got that. But of course, he talked about the NHS. His mum worked in the NHS. His sister worked in the NHS. His very attractive wife worked in the NHS. They should wheel her out a bit more. She looks rather good. I could see you looking.
Well, there you go.
Steady, Eddie.
Okay, all right. I'm not sure, quite sure how to react to that, but there we go. But this is the thing, though, because personality does win in politics.
Very important.
And you can't get around that. Liz Truss, with the best will in the world, seems very, very awkward in public. Keir Starmer, I think, has grown into it a little bit. And also, it's fair to say he hasn't had anything to do with heckles this year or mass protests outside. The students have gone home and his grown-ups
I got the feeling that the audience had almost been hand-picked, selected. Lots of whoops and cheers.
Which is what happened with Blair.
It's been years since Walter Wolfgang was thrown out of the Labour conference.
Exactly.
Do you remember that for heckling several years ago? I mean, I personally think that Liz Truss is a lot better when she gets off script and talks from the hip, as it were. There were flashes of that in the Tory leadership. There are flashes of that in her first outing at PMQs.
Very good.
When she's overproduced and overprepared, she's not nearly as good as when, she's much better than when she's reading for a script. I get the feeling that Keir Starmer will never be able to get off script. I don't think he's got the courage and the chutzpah and the self-confidence to do that.
You've hit the nail on the head there. He's just not got it. But at this particular moment in time, when people are looking around and maybe thinking that society is crumbling around their ears, do they actually want a steady hand on the tiller and not maybe someone who can make them laugh at a dinner party? We're going to return to this, though. We're going to return to it because now, with a big pledge on green energy, saying that he'd create a publicly owned renewable energy giant, let's hear, I believe, what Keir Starmer had to say about that. Is that right?
I'm so proud to launch our Green Prosperity Plan, a plan that will turn the UK into a green growth superpower. And driving the plan forward is a goal that will put us ahead of any major economy.
Right, OK, that was Keir Starmer there. I'm going to go back now to Liam Halligan and Andrew Pearce, who join me. I mean, this is predominantly, I suppose, maybe a bit of one for you, Liam, in terms of the actual costings of this. I mean, he said that, OK, we're going to have great British energy, there's going to be nationalisation.
You've got to pay for that.
You've got to pay for that. He's also said, from my notes anyway, watching it live, 100 billion quid dished out to cap for an energy price freeze. I mean, by definition, you've got to pay for that, can we?
And insulating 16 million homes, which is very, very expensive. Yeah, you could say, in fairness, we were told Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget was expensive. How many spending pledges were in this speech. But look, a party political conference speech is different from standing at the dispatch box and making a pledge. So we've got to give the guy a bit of latitude there. But I didn't see any sense that Labour was going to sort of rein in its spending. But of course, the headline in terms of economics, the Tories presented Keir Starmer with an open goal, and for once he didn't hit the corner flag. He opened his speech with the sense that the Tories say there's no money, there's the biggest cost of living crisis in a generation, yet they can still find money for the 1%. With that additional rate tax cut from 45 to 40%. Yeah, as Andrew will tell you, there are plenty of Tory MPs that think that was just a mistake in terms of timing and priority. It looked venal at a time when so many families are struggling.
Even though it cost very little, about 2 billion, and some people think it'll bring in even more money. It is the optic.
Talking of optics, actually, I mean, he said that there's going to be none of these tax cuts for the top earners, for example, yet more money for the NHS at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know where that money's coming from either. And the insulation, Liam's right to raise that, insulation is hugely expensive. If you get those creatures from Insulate Britain on any programme and ask them what their programme would cost, they don't know.
Well, they haven't even insulated their own home, so they don't even know what the price of insulating one home costs a lot of that lot, would they?
But it would be prohibitively expensive. And I don't know over what time period.
And I don't know how much a mortgage guarantee for first-time buyers is going to cost when we don't know where borrowing costs are going in financial markets. That's an open-ended promise.
I know. It didn't sound very original either.
No, and what they're trying to do, Patrick, as you know well, as we all know, as many of our viewers and listeners know, is they are trying to beat the Tories on their own home ground. They are trying to become the party of economic competence. And I go back to the original point. At a time when there has been so much turmoil on financial markets, the Tories look vulnerable, to say the least, in terms of that core principle of what a Conservative government could do. I think Keir Starmer could have raised his game and really scored, a home run here, to use a baseball analogy. And I would say, in terms of the electorate, he barely got to first base.
But actually, this is a damaging thing for Britain, potentially, which is if Keir Starmer in first base, in first gear, is essentially good enough to win an election in this country, what does that say about the wider political class?
I know. It is not a great selection, is it? It is not a great selection. And a lot of the Labour front bench are very weak. I thought the Shadow Chancellor's speech yesterday by Rachel Reeves was very poor. Very poor. And Kwasi Kwarteng, I mean, what's he do? He walks out of the Treasury front door yesterday and doesn't say a word, knowing there's going to be about 400 journalists there.
I think, with all respect, I think Rachel Reeves was better than that. I thought she did pretty well. I think Labour need a sort of really straight, competent person at the Treasury in order to convey this idea that they're confident. She's the only senior politician in our firmament at the moment who's worked at the Bank of England. That's not a bad credential to have at a time like this.
No, it's certainly not, and I don't know if you can quite pick this up here, but there's more of a hub now. Yes, I know that people are filing out of this conference centre, which is just out there, but there is a...
They're fleeing. They're fleeing.
They're not fleeing.
The leader's speech is done, they'll all go. The whole, it'll be like a hot air balloon that's been punched.
Well, I'm glad I'm here till 6 because I might miss the traffic. Anyway, right, let's quickly just hear again about what Keir Starmer said about the economy and about these new tax cuts, which frankly, at the minute, are proving a bit controversial because we're all wondering that classic thing, where's the money coming from?
A Britain that is fairer, greener, more dynamic, and that isn't afraid to use the power of government to help working people succeed. Because we can't go on like this. What we've seen in the past few days has no precedent. The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? They've crashed the pound. And for what? Higher interest rates, higher inflation, higher borrowing. And for what? Not for you, not for working people, for tax cuts for the richest 1% in our society. Don't forget, don't forgive. The only way to stop this is with a Labour government.
All right, OK. I tell you what, Emily Thornberry's hanging around dangerously closely here. I can't help but wonder whether or not we might be able to entice her onto stage. We'll have to wait and see about all of that. But I'm joined now by our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's been sitting, pondering, soaking everything in, absorbing Sir Keir Starmer's speech. And you seem thoughtful.
I am a little thoughtful. I thought overall pretty solid speech. Definitely a lot better than last year, but that was a pretty low bar, wasn't it? And clearly went down very well in the hall. Really interesting in kind of, there was the red meat, wasn't there, the talk about that nationalised British energy company, clearly for the delegates in the room. There was a very strong message on SNP in Scotland, no coalition, no deal going to happen there. But also just a sense that, you know, there is an optimism here at the Labour Party. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, that certainly I've not seen for years and years and years. And you got that sense that there is an expectation almost in the speech itself that, you know, Labour could well win the next election, but a recognition, given where the public finances are, Patrick, that even if Labour do get there, they were going to have to make some potentially very, very tough choices indeed if the economy is not in a good state. And I keep using the word if, because we keep thinking that's where it might be, but clearly the government think that these glitches that we're seeing at the moment will pass.
Well, it's if there's enough landing room, isn't there, for the Conservative Party government? It's if there's enough time between now and the next general election for their economic gamble to pay off, then actually, frankly, if people have got more money in their pocket at the time of the next general election, then maybe a lot of the talk that we had here from Sir Keir Starmer about economic incompetence from the Conservative Party will dissipate. But there were some elements here which I thought were really fascinating for me. Mentioning controlled immigration and a points-based system, not reversing Brexit, obviously, but that's at least nice to hear for a lot of people, a lot of our viewers and listeners. As you alluded to there, basically no Indy Ref 2 for Scotland. These are areas where Conservatives, or people maybe who just shifted their vote to the Tories, soft Tories perhaps, could now come back and go, hang on a minute, I actually quite like this. I feel safer voting Labour, and that should worry Truss.
Yeah, indeed, because at the same time, I think, you know, after 12 years of a Conservative government, whatever you think of the Conservative government, that's a long time in power.
That's a long time.
People will be getting kind of tired and frustrated with the Conservative Party. And you know what? They may not have given the Labour Party any room, actually, in the past. But there is a sense that I think soft Conservative voters, people who may have backed Labour in the past, people who might have voted for Tony Blair in '97, for example, are now actually engaging with Keir Starmer. And yes, they might think he's a little bit dull. And yes, they might not have fallen in love with the Labour Party, but are they willing to listen to Labour for the first time in years? Yeah. I think they are. And also, maybe the contrast that Keir Starmer was trying to present today of essentially, I will be strong and stable, if you like, Theresa May, is in contrast to the kind of, you know, the ups and downs that we're seeing in the market under the Conservative Party at the moment.
And another key point that I think is absolutely fascinating, and I got this from going around doing Vox Pops and mingling with people earlier on, which is that tribalism of, you could say, far left and then the more centrist elements of the Labour Party, I'm getting the sense has dissipated, not just because of their leader, but because actually now, I think more so than ever, they just want to win. And they're willing to actually, even the left of the Tory party, drag themselves a bit more central if that's what it takes to get mass appeal. So actually maybe, just maybe, the time is right for Keir Starmer.
Well, we'll see. I mean, don't get us wrong on all of this. As you say, the economic policy is a gamble. The government still thinks it's going to potentially pay off, but you raise a really good point about the runway, if you like, the length of time now, the people, are they going to feel better off in 2024? At the moment, you'd have to suggest possibly not. The economy would have to bounce back pretty quickly. Second of all, for Labour, and you know, if people are willing to listen to Labour now and potentially willing to vote for them, even then, it's still a massive uphill struggle, Patrick. And I say that because Labour obviously slumped to the lowest share of the votes, or the lowest number of seats, since the 1930s, the last general election. They would need a bigger swing than Blair got in '97. They'd need the biggest swing since '45. That is an incredible task for any party.
Absolutely. I think the task I was alluding to there was as well about him uniting that party. Labour, very, very divided at last conference.
When you've got the scent of power, which I think they do, clearly...
That whiff.
The dissent, as you say, or the fringes of the party, think in the end, actually, it's better unite behind Keir Starmer. And I think what happened last Friday, that budget announcement, was good timing in terms of Labour unity.
It was indeed. Darren McCaffrey, thank you very, very much. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor there. Right, this is GB News very much live here with me, Patrick Christie's, coming to you from this Labour Party conference here in Liverpool. Loads more reaction to Keir Starmer's keynote speech. Labour MP Emily Thornberry will be with me next. Don't miss that. It's going to be box office. I will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you.
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.